Right, this is going to be a new episode of Snake and Banter. Our guest is a return guest. It is Nero, who is a staff writer. They always want to clarify that when they have these titles at HLTV. He is not like editor, that he's just a writer. He just writes his own stuff. And interesting detail, I won't go into this much, but he's also one of the rare unicorns that made it through the filter of being a fan first who had access to Twitter, didn't flame me too hard, and then got onto our shows, and now is well regarded and we like him and he's allowed to be here. One, Nero, you don't know how limited that is. There's even people, put it this way, in your fan group who will never ever be on any of our shows. They already shit the bed too many years ago. They threw too many tomatoes when the actors were on stage. And also, it's not that you never flamed me. You're just quite a reasonable person who's quite affable. So even when you sort of mildly criticise me, you just did it in that sort of, like you see on the shows, guys, he's kind of got that Hugh Grant sort of like, oh, golly, did I say that? Oh, shit, well, maybe I didn't mean it then. See, you already get that British thing's working for British. Spoiler, Nero. I'll tell you some lore. People do know this. Maui only accidentally got through that filter. He actually did flame me on an alt account about Russell Westbrook's playing the NBA. And if I knew that, I'm sorry, I never ever would have talked to him or ever brought him on any shows at any point in time. He would never have a career right now. He'd still just be stuck in ESEA Maine or whatever, messaging Austin like, can I come on stream or something and play Mythic? Like, and they'd be like, if we need a sixth more. But there's the thing though, he's lucky because he got through, and I didn't find that out till Rita actually told me the story years later. And luckily, at that point, we were already established. So it was all good. There was more important things then, so it's okay. Some people get through by luck.
It wasn't an accident. I used alts on purpose.
Oh, right. Okay. I mean, I will say, I've also...
Mine's luck as well, to be honest.
Is it?
I think I definitely have my moments on that Twitter account, for sure. But I know not for you. I think you're lucky.
You flamed some other people, though.
I was like I think Taco blocked me at some point.
I think he's blocked everyone. Yeah.
There's always, you've definitely got hot takes or two on there, but that's prime. It's different era. Yeah. But I think you were lucky because I basically was like a Device Dupree fanboy.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
So then when all the fucking refresh, all the refresh stuff happened, I was just straight on that. Just, oh, we hate refresh. Love the players, hate refresh.
Yeah, perfect.
Just cosplaying football fans who hate their owners. It's just like, yeah, this is great. This is great. We love this.
It's just a good job you weren't an SK fan, I guess, back in the day. They were that was the prime material. Also, to be fair, it's not just you. I mean, I won't say who for obvious reasons, but there's actually a really legendary 1.6 player who one time when I asked him to do an interview was like, I don't really want to do public stuff anymore. But by the way, I'm not even mad, but one time I have an alt and I did actually flame you about something in CSGO and you blocked me. And I was like, good. Then you fucking deserve it, you little rat. So whatever. Anyway, it's all good. Sadly, I wish I could actually say who. It's actually like a Hall of Famer as well. Not like this current HLTV Hall, but like, like a top 50 player, put it that way. But anyway, which just makes me now think I won't do this because I'm
maybe
not
it's worth rethinking that, Thorin, because I think a lot of people who just have strong opinions will get blocked by you eventually. So maybe there's because actually you did unblock my alt account, just so you know. Like you did a lot. Like
spoiler, I haven't broadcast this. I've unblocked almost everyone.
Oh, okay.
I actually just used something that unblocked almost every set. That's why all the people now have like the maddest content. What happens is you reach the block limit and it's now unblocking people. You can't. I actually just used someone to unblock the majority of people, and I just don't read the replies anymore. So it's actually way more simple than it seems. I know, but it's okay. People always have to have some puppet carrying a puppet, carrying my block list or something. But it's all right. So on the show, obviously, we always have the guests bring the first point, and we start with the good. So what is the good point we are talking about today, Nero?
Yeah, I mean, I decided it before today, which is great. But I wanted to talk about Spinx because so much of the MOUZ move is like obviously about Shuey. And I think people aren't really talking enough about how well Spinx fits in these Broline roles because, I don't know, like obviously this is like a top 20 player for the last however many years, whatever people want to say about personality. We're not going to be able to get into that from the outside really. But I just think as an actual player, it would have been sad if he was on bench for 6 months or contract or anything like that. And I just think him coming into MOUZ for Broline roles is going to let him be a bit more aggressive like he was in Ents when I think he was sometimes more fun to watch. So that'll be really fun. And I think just generally, I mean, I wish he'd come in for Broline and then they kept Shuey, obviously, like everyone else in the world apart from probably Cyclone. But I just think generally that's like a real statement signing for a team like MOUZ who... there's still people who have that maybe wrong perception that they're a small org still. Like I still hear that on there sometimes, or like on Twitter or something. People say that, they're selling team, blah blah blah. Like, but they've got Jimmy to. That can't be an easy process. They've signed a statement player like Spinx. I think people need to readjust their expectations of MOUZ, and I think even if Broline's not the IGL in 6 months, and I probably don't think he will be, I think this is a real statement signing, and like the Zersh and Spinx combo, I think that has real good potential as like a early round, late round actual firepower, and then Jimmy as the overqualified anchor. I just think that's an amazing rifle trio that, like in a vacuum with all of these people improving at the same pace, I think that's a really strong rifling trio.
I'm glad you bring this up actually, because it's a cool angle to view them, because I made it, I think, my bad or my ugly point a few shows ago, just kind of where is Spinx going. I outlined it. I actually said, and I didn't know anything about this, where he would go. My first and kind of like only pick was he could fit on MOUZ, and it almost was actually for Brolin's positions, because I was like, okay, who's kind of underperforming of teams in the top 6 or 7 or 10 really, and who could he fit for? And I just didn't see that it would happen like this, though. So obviously, having to bring out the bad side of this whole thing is that I wish it actually were just at the expense of Brolin. I wish it actually was just Spinx for Brolin. And if we had Shuhei still, then we could see how this all plays out. And I wish that Shuhei just took a more sacrificial side of this, where instead of being, you know, the con player on Mirage, for example, he gave it to Spinx, or they shifted people around such that he ends up just being a site anchor, and then we get Spinx into a lot of the rotator positions that he likes. I guess, I mean, yeah, if you're just going to make the good point simply that this trio is good between Spinx, Yimpat, Exertion, I can't really fault that. I can't find too much issue with that. It's just that obviously the cost was so immense that now Shuhei is not playing for a top 10 team. And I could similarly make a bad point or ugly point on this exact podcast and say, where the hell is Shuhei going? Why isn't he going anywhere yet? Why is G2 not already made the move?
Sure.
Yeah. I think it's the same as, because we did the podcast with Ash recently, and I think he spoke about literally that of, he thinks Chewy would be very happy being like, because he's been brought up the right way. I think he wants to be like the Karrigan type in-game leader. It's just that if he's a good enough fragger, then there's no point him doing that. But I think he would be very happy anchoring for like a Zersh and Spinx. Like, I don't know why he's not in the team anymore, but I don't imagine it's that, because like, come on, just like, you're a good enough fragger. It's the same as Kixan in Falcons, I think. Like, he's absolutely fine anchoring if he has to, because you're going to have good mid-round callers that are used to those rotate positions as well. Like, you don't need to be in full control all the time. And even if like people kind of talk a little bit about Shuey being quite a controlling, quite tactical in-game leader, but I think on CT side, like if you trust your riflers, that's just shouldn't be a problem, really.
The real problem that overwhelms this whole topic, which actually is why I agree, no one's really looked at like the positives of MOUZ in this lineup, is it's actually drama on both sides. One, people think they know, the other one they don't know. So all I'll tell you is this. My sources within MOUZ Sports, when I asked them very quickly about this move, here's all they said. They just said everyone wanted him out. Shuhei, that is. That's it. Right. Now, by the way, didn't prod any more than that. I'm not going to reveal anything more that could give away who said. Put it this way, that implies, by the way, it's been framed in interviews as they don't agree with his vision for the game, maybe his calling style, like you say, maybe he's too controlling. They're trying to do like the Alexi B angle on that, we can't work with the micromanaging guy, right? The problem I have with that is, it wouldn't be everyone wanted you out then, it'd be like somebody wanted to be the IGL, or the coach didn't like it, or so. They made it sound like there's some sort of personality conflict, or I mean, I wouldn't infer more because I don't know, but it almost sounded to me like some mini Spinx drama, like maybe he's got some beef with someone in the org, or he's acted out in some way. By the way, you have to realise when you're around people as much as this in a team, there's a famous saying in English, familiarity breeds contempt. Like, you're going to have times where, like, what's just an argument over something in the game, like, just gets too tense, and then that's like the moment where the guy who already was out on you anyway and was annoyed by something, then he's like, right, I don't want to work you again. And it's so easy politically for these things behind the scenes to just go into cliques and go that way. So I'll just put that out there. That's the reason why I find it very interesting that it's like, essentially, I would just say, not only are they, by the way, first of all, as Maui pointed out, they have to present it that it's just no big deal, because they want to bloody sell this guy. If the point is, if, as Ash says, G2's going to get this guy, they don't want him to go, well, here's fucking nothing, because we know you don't want him and no one wants him. They want it to be like, oh, hey, you're keeping that really good, but yeah, totally legit. Like, only used a few miles and you buy an old grandma to go to the shops. Oh, that's still in the garage still. We can still sell that almost at asking price. Like, you want to like an almost, this bad boy here, this shoe he can fit all these strats into for majors, just not for playoffs, obviously. They want, obviously, someone to pay them an actual buyout for it. So, by the way, it's obvious they're not going to tell you what actually happened first. And also, by the way, the actual Spinx angle itself, if I quickly address that, is why you don't want that to leak out. Because here's another thing, mate. When that Spinx stuff leaks out, and behind the scenes, people had heard some of those stories, that means a lot of other teams are just going to at least think before they sign you. Whereas before that, if it was like the Shuey angle, and it was just some weird thing of like, oh, Spinx just has a difference of vision in the game of how he wants his role to be played. So anyway, he's benched, and we brought in ROPS. Bro, he'd be like a mega eligible player to go to loads of teams. Like, the joke is MOUZ is actually sort of in the middle group of where he should probably have gone. You'd have thought he'd instantly be snapped up by like a G2. By the way, I can tell you, if it wasn't for the nationality, I can just confirm these things. He could have been in Falcons tomorrow, so could NER0cs. There's the whole thing where, but the problem is, you go and look at all these other teams, they either have a good team already, or they don't want to add someone who might be like a problem personality. So people were never evaluating his game. So I agree with you. Everyone's only looked at the Shuhei side, and the logic goes, because they've lost a real IGL, it doesn't matter who you add, you can never be as good as the old MOUZ. That is probably true. I do think if someone is doing something as IGL, you can't really just replace them with a fragger and go, hey, this guy's going to learn the role. Even if he learns the role, just think of like some of the best role swaps ever, like Nitro. Bro, it took him a year or two to get it under his belt, really, you know. He had like some things going early, but then he couldn't play his own game at the same time. To get it all together does take a while. So the real problem is, I think people have just over-indexed on the idea that like Broland probably isn't going to be a good IGL in, let's say, the next 6 months. And then you've also got the factor, but then that's where I actually agree. This is where I'll come around to the point you're making. The point people aren't making is you literally upgraded Broland's role of lurking. You went from Broland, who was like a serviceable elite team lurker. By the way, it's not, he doesn't even want to do that role. He basically admitted as much in my Reflections interview. He would be the playmaker like Exertion if everything was like, if he could snap his fingers and he had his 2019 form back. The problem is, in this team, Exertion is too good. In the same way, by the way, as if Donk wanted to join MOUZ tomorrow, Exertion would have to find another role or fuck off out the team because he isn't Donk. That's just the way everyone knows where the bread is buttered. But then what people are missing is, you nailed it. Not only have you upgraded Broland, by the way, we already had Exertion and Yimfa in this team. Those are the two players that we were all saying could go to any other top team and make them number one. We've added a third player who was actually considered like a star at his role. You've now got 3 star players, and then people like Maui even rate Torshi. So the actual firepower, by the way, is potentially crazy. How about that for a start off? This is like top 3 firepower in the entire world in this roster, assuming you get anything out of Broland when he's IGL as well. And by the way, since Broland played up-tempo aggressive roles previously, I'm going to guess that'll even be half decent as like a frag in IGL, Apex-esque as it were. And I think you've nailed it as well, mate. The part people are missing completely is, one, I'm almost certain Exertion and Spinx have like the Israeli connection going on, so they obviously like each other. And I love combos of stars that have no overlap, where you actually like fill up. That's why I think Zebu and fucking ROPS is perfect as well. Like, you're going to do different things, and that's why you're just going to vibe with that guy completely. So I think it looks sick, mate. Like, you just look at this squad. I'll even say the one thing I always said was a flaw about Spinx's game was, because he is a lurker, I've never found him to be exceptional in like 1vx rounds. That's why I actually thought the ROPS upgrade for Vitality was an interesting gamble. Bro, we've got Yimfat here. We don't even need that. Like, we've literally even got that taken care of. Like, the only thing they don't have is a really good IGL. So we'll just have to see how the Broland part works out. And even then, listen, you've only tanked this season. What's crazy is, you know, we all spent the whole last season talking about, oh, these players are just going to go to other teams. Bro, if anything, it's the other way around. At the end of this season, if MOUZ actually decided to either sell Shuhei for a buyout or break the bank, imagine if they added an IGL. By the way, I'll just give a ridiculous one because everyone's going to say it's insane now because he's not good, right? I'm just saying, if tomorrow my boy Snappy walked in the door and sat down with these 4 players, mate, I'll go and fucking hot take point made and make about 50 crazy hot takes for you about the majors he's going to win and all sorts of shit. That lineup would be bonkers. That would be like a dream for almost any IGL that wants even a vaguely loose style to have. Like, those are the pieces where if you have them, you go, I don't even need an excuse. Just let me fucking cook, bro. Let me cook. So yeah, and I agree with you. I think it's a great point. This team actually... you've even seen it already. People, this is also, I want to say one last thing here. The reason why I agree, it's actually, overall, it is a good thing that Spinx joined, and especially for the future. Here's why. Bro, this is where I'm so bored of people just like being really disingenuous. People actually tried to pretend that what they did at Katowice was how the team's going to be now with the Zelex guy. They didn't even have Spinx. You would have believed from the way those threads and all those takes were that was just the real team with Spinx and they just failed, mate. You've seen already at this PGL Cluj, mate, they are going to be an actual problem for everyone except the really, really good teams in this game. Like, I could even see maps where you just fuck around and you'll even win a map off the absolute best team. So I'm kind of hyped. I was already a Spinx fan anyway, but I don't think it's the end of the world. The IGL thing will fix itself. And if anything, like I said, if you're a MOUZ fan, this is hella copium. Because like I said, all of a sudden you might actually be able to fuck around, especially with this VRL system where people aren't taking individual players. Maybe you can fuck around, get an IGL and actually just be the best team, mate. Maybe that's now plausible.
Yeah, I think it easily could have been a bad point, or the kind of like, there's just too many star IGLs now. I think it's just not really something that people want to see, and I think there's definitely like a lack of faith within these kind of tier 1 teams that you can take an in-game leader, like, because I think you've made a point a million times of in-game leaders can have bad years in bad projects, and it doesn't make them really a worse in-game leader. Like the Ent Snappy is still there, and I love that NIP team. I just wish they'd like thought about VRS slightly more.
Yeah,
maybe,
absolutely.
But I think the actual individuals are great, but because this is the type of team that, you know, if Snappy had an Ent year last year, then everyone would be clamoring for him, and it's the same. You know, you hate him, but Hooksy, like just a normal in-game leader.
The joke is,
with these 3 riflers and Torji's like arena.
You
impacts,
think I hate him, mate?
It's a team.
I unironically would have put him immediately after G2 into either Astralis or Team Liquid the next day if it was up to me. My point is, he did not do what he should have done with Nico and MonolZ, mate. That's my problem. I just put him into one team below that. I actually think he's a very competent player. No, here's the analogy, Nero. You're a football fan. If people know, I'll give you the best example because it's going on right now. The manager David Moyes was a laughing stock at a bunch of massive clubs. But when you put him on teams like Fulham or Everton, he's fucking really good. It's just you have to put him with like the personnel that fits his style. And you have to give like his strengths a go. So same thing with Snappy. It's like, obviously Falcons didn't work, so put him with a different set of people that it would work with.
Yeah, and I know he'll say that, well, Falcons didn't give him good players either. I think that's definitely.
I think that's true.
Like, he's probably going to retire and still have a bee in his bonnet about never getting
of course.
Nico in that team, because like that is the truth. Like he didn't have a star rifle yet. We don't know what Snappy would be like with a super team, but we know that we've seen NER0cs, we've seen Spinx, we know he can get like I think in late 2023 or something. I think maybe the best role if you're an up and coming player is to be like a snappy lurker, like the aggressive lurker in a snappy system. Like that's freebies. That's a free great move for you. So,
it's why, if people don't know, he actually initially even did put NER0cs in that lurker role before they made him like the playmaker, basically, because that was just seen as the role in his team that you just frag the fuck out. And by the way, don't worry, it'll be a bit like the Liquid one. Once everyone's safe and no one can get harmed, I already know it all. I'll just drop the fucking drama bomb, mate. And by the way, there is some hella spice on the fucking Falcons one. There's some shit where like it will do that thing where you do a double take on some of the people you know in the scene. It'll be bonkers. But anyway, that's teasing. That's a bit out. Just wait till you see the Liquid one, then you'll see where I'm going with that. Right. Anyway, Maui, what is your good point?
Yeah, I try to make some of my points relevant to the guests. So I picked this one, and I think that it's incredibly important that HLTV has updated their website to make it so that there's this VRS forecast going into every match.
Yes.
When you click on the matches, you can see, for example, like we're recording this and Pain and the MongolZ are playing right now. And I could see that if Pain win this, they'll actually move up their Valve ranking to 10th in the world. And I could see what happens if they lose too. Just because at the end of the day, it's kind of annoying because the ranking system seems flawed and it was hard to move through in terms of like reading all the ups and downs of the GitHub and like how it's changed in multiple iterations. So now just having a VRS forecast that's practical, I think it's just programmed simply to output whatever that GitHub would normally output. So now I can see this and it can shape my narrative building so much easier. So now, like, it's just basically like, good job to HLTV on this. And I actually would just extend it because I don't know what Nero can really talk about more, but I found this to be really interesting, is that I also think that the WPA that you guys have added, the win probability added, like the alpha version of it kind of kind of feels like it's its own like leadify rating, if I'm being honest. But it's like it's good that you guys have this in terms of determining who EVPs, MVPs are for just like in a live matchup or in a matchup that you guys are able to parse through, because it looks like you guys are making the move to rating 3.0. And I just kind of wanted to hear if you had any information about like any of these two things on the website that have see me. One is directly benefiting me. The other, I will see how it benefits me as it goes on.
Yeah, I really thought you were going to just talk about Ema's MVP again, to be honest. But no, spare that one for later. But yeah, I mean, I don't know too much about the VRS one. I know that a few, like Messioso and people who know maybe basically too much about VRS. I mean, at least it's his job, but a few other people. Because actual VRS is so much more about your placing and your land placing than actually like your, I think they call it opponent network or something. So I think it is a little bit like it's one of those cool features, and then but the actual like how much prize money you win and everything like that is. But yeah, it's not, because there's like a big little disclaimer on it. But it is cool. I really like seeing how much of a difference one game does make. I can speak much more about the WPA stuff, and yeah, it is basically leadify rating. There's no other way to do it. But there's also been lots of papers about it. Like I remember reading a paper about it. I think he's called like Peter Xenopoulos or something. He's done loads of actual like academic papers on Counter-Strike data and stats stuff. And that's where I've got the win probability added actual phrasing from. But yeah, it's basically is like leadify rating in that it looks at each kill on its own, and the reason we want to do that is because, you know, like it's obvious to anyone watching, some kills matter much more than others, and you can try and like half-ass that and say like, oh, an opening kill should mean more, or you can just go full deep dive, and that is what we're trying to do. For basically, I think it should be about half of rating, because we still want a mix, and it's very, very early. Like we got data for basically the Katowice event and the Katowice playoffs that had some WPA stuff and it had eco-adjusted stuff. And I'm not. I think I like the word alpha. We'll use alpha because there's so many challenges with like a pure leadify rating. I think it can be really difficult where, you know, if you're on a 1v4 and you get 3 kills and then lose the 1v1, it'll think you've had a bad round, basically, because it's just the way the percentages work that there's lots I need to do to actually look at each role, and should each role be equal? Like, is that even something that we should do? Like, and I don't think it's really possible. I think it's not.
Oh, it's a philosophical debate, anyway. Right?
Yeah, like this is the thing. Like, we're never going to have the one number. I know it's never ever going to be a one number that defines everything about CS. Like, you can have an AI model trained for 10 years on this, and it will still, you know, watching the game. You can't replace watching a game, but the thing with rating 3.0 is that it can watch more games than any of you can watch.
There you go. Yeah,
that's the whole point of stats. It can watch every single game in the database it's watched, and you know, and that sample size is often more important than how good your eye test is over a couple of demos. And I think it is really important. I think it's going to be very challenging for us because it's going to change so much of how the community actually think about a game. Because once we start taking into account economy and stuff, people, you know how they're watching. They're not like staring at the radar, like taking notes all game. They're like, oh, my player got 20 kills, and then they check their fantasy team or something, right? This is going to be really weird for people, where a player will have 20 kills, and once we take into account the economy and like the win probability of all their kills and stuff, they're going to check a scoreboard and be like, what the fuck happened? Like, why is my player bad now? And it's going to be really hard for the community, I think, because rating is still kind of just linked to fragging, basically. So that's going to be really difficult. And it's so early. I'm not even giving anything away because it's so early actually in developing it. But yeah, it's going to take over my life for the next 6 months, I think. But that's kind of why I'm here, I guess. It's kind of what I want to do. So it's been really fun so far, and I just want to keep using it. I do feel a bit bad for Apex because I think if we didn't have this data, he definitely gets an EVP at Katowice. Right. But we basically looked at it and he just like he was like really good in 4 maps of the 5 playoff maps, and you're like, okay, that's pretty good. That's normally an EVP. He even messaged me like EVP this time because he was aggrieved about Cologne when we also didn't give him one. And yeah, he eco-fragged like a motherfucker in those 4 maps. So that just like when it was close already, just couldn't quite get it. So, and the French fans obviously already love me so much, so that wasn't ideal to have to kind of deny Apex and EVP as well. But it's really interesting. I think even from the small set of data I've got so far, you can see how much certain players are going to move up and down and stuff. And it is going to change the way, I think, people who just look at scoreboards, I think it's going to force them to have to think differently about what is actually important when they're watching a game, instead of just checking the little KD bars on the HUD.
Here's what's funny. This is actually why I actually appreciate people from HLTV who can have these discussions without being all defensive, because the problem the guy who made the HLTV rating 1.0 had was he actually did allow fans to think it was a supercomputer AI that just knew the game of CS and was telling you the truth. Whereas, like, obviously he set the formula. He decided what the weighting was and what might count for more. And I've always made this point. I do notice, fair play, like ESL, you actually have eventually listened over time. I noticed the new one of rating 2.1 almost immediately capped James' bullshit and made him suddenly not a player that looked like he was doing like EVP numbers all the time, because spoiler, it was just obvious that the weighting must have just been too much on saves or something like that, you know, which is obviously a classic part of his game that was kind of way beyond other people's. But the problem you have is this: what you're now facing is what should always have been the backlash against HLTV anyway, which is people who are fans, they're stupidly expressing it, Nero, but they are right. You have actually used your brain and what you think is more philosophically more important to skew the formula, because spoiler, it would always have to be that way. First of all, there's no uniform number that could be for weighting that could be for everything, like you say. You can't just take every aspect of the game and go, that's equal. You can't take every role and act like it's equal. By the way, imagine how insane football modelling would be if you had to treat the defender like the striker, but then we all know goals win games. Like, you're already getting into philosophical territory whenever you lay this stuff down. But the difference that the fan doesn't understand, and he very foolishly expresses, is you didn't actually do what I just joked there and go, right, this fucking James needs to learn a lesson. I'm going to take him down a peg or two. Let's take this knob down and then this one to 11. There you go, James. No, what you did is you actually tried to like think what would be the aspects that maybe we're over-indexing in the game here, or actually what aspects aren't even being given enough credit. We'll tweak that, and then when we then reapply the model, James went down and then another player picked whatever player you want, went up. By the way, I agree on the eye test one. I've never said that it's only eye test. The best thing about using stats and especially modeling is, as you say, even the biggest nerd ever can't really watch all the demos. And so even the eye test, first of all, you'd missed it. What I always say is this: what you need to think of is it's not that the model is giving you the answer, it's just pointing you in a direction. If you think of it that way, it will literally be an aid to the eye test. So I'll give you the best example ever. Your work actually helped showcase this, essentially the argument I've been making for 3 fucking years, because I know how CS works. And spoiler, it wasn't just eye test. I've talked to all his teammates. I asked them all how he operates, what he does. So yes, if you are a noob fan, you are correct. Your eye test is absolutely right that Blame F is fucking unbelievable against Ecos. Now, the problem is your brain doesn't work in all the rounds where he's also unbelievable against full buys. For some reason, your brain deleted those because it didn't fit your narrative, and you just said he just equal farms. So the difference is people like Imma in that MVP and fucking Apex at Katowice. I'm sorry. Listen, mate, we are punishing you for just equal fragging too much. We're not saying it doesn't have any value, but it doesn't have the same value as killing a full buy. And what's funny about that, by the way, Nero, is I get why the individual player is mad. Of course he is. He feels like you've taken away from him the scoreboard shit. We've all been telling these guys for years it's about the scoreboard, right? Well, here's the problem. I'll just say this to take a little bit of your sympathy away from the pro players. You're the same pro players who used to literally tell me before Astralis won the major that Device just farms Ecos and he is not actually a top player. He's not even the best player in Astralis. They all told me, some of the Hall of Famers, Nero, told me Cajun B is the best player in that team. The joke being he's the one they shed and then went on and won the major. But they used to tell me Device is just equal. And I used to tell them, same thing with the Blame F1. Oh, he's definitely killing loads of Ecos, but just let me just pull up a demo for you and show you what he's doing with Ops as well. Like, he's killing Fallen and them and all the rest of them. So I get why that all gets lost. I get why it gets lost. It's by the way, all these complicated topics, it's like you say about the one number. People always want to make it simplistic, so the answer is simple. It's human nature, unfortunately.
But I think it'll also help the players who have been categorized as eco-fraggers, like Emo and stuff, because when they're still good on this rating, because they're still good in gun rounds, because because there's not that many ecos in a game. So I've
No.
always thought, like, if you're just criticizing player as an eco fragger, like, how many anti-full ecos? Like, there's always, like, armored pistols or...
It feels like there's only 2.5 max, right? You know, there's not many.
Yeah, so it's... Like, someone like Emo was still pretty good on our model at Katowice, right? Like, yes, we could tell he frags a lot against... But the thing with Emo is he's really good against, like, 4 spies. So it basically depends on where you put the buy filter. He's not, like, farming USPs that much. He's just really, really good at getting like 2 kills every time.
Bro, think about it. He plays Connector, CT Mirage, which is where you get rushed by like 4 Glocks all the time. That's just the obvious position. That's not even like people always imply, Nero. They make it sound like what the guys do is they go, guys, it's like when you want the ace and there's the last kill. Hold back. Let me just go and I need to farm some stats. And then he like, fucking goes around the map. No, they just come to the positions that these guys play on CT and they fucking kill them. Like, as you say, it'd be very different if they were, like, sending this guy on his own, like, super VIP armor to just only hunt USPs with the CT save. Like, yeah, I would agree. That would be incredibly cynical and not the way to play Pro CS. But no one's doing that as far as I know. That's just complete fictional fantasy. And then, by the way, back to the actual thing about the graphics, though. The reason I think this is awesome is because this is why I've tried to promote certain people so much in the scene who, sadly, in their own way, are a bit boring because they're nerds, because you have to be a boring nerd to care about this shit and to live this shit. So hence why I always tell you, watch all these episodes I do on my shows with MSioso, spoiler Nero, they get the least views of any content I do. Because the problem is no one wants to hear like a rules lawyer, like, and then if the players fought, no one get, the eyes glaze over. It's like talking about accounting, mate. They don't give a fuck. You got to make it sexy and you've got to have an angle. But as people have noticed that Ash, because obviously his team was one punished by this, the fact that people didn't understand is it's actually not that big a deal, the sort of elo system of who you beat. But the problem is that mixed with where you are in the tournament can, as this ranking shows, which is the dope part about it, show you that if you lose this game, you will now drop a certain one. So famously, when they lost a game at Katowice, that actually did drop them out of another tournament. Now, the reason that's not even as crazy once you get used to it is, I've spent my entire adult life watching tennis just like that, Nero, where if you know how many points the person has, because tennis just works on a 52-week system rolling, and essentially that means if you made it to the semis of a major, and you go to that major next year, if you lose before the semis, you are going to lose points, because you didn't defend the points you had from last year, and they're going to no longer be valid the next week. Well, that means literally, and sometimes the commentators know this shit, bro. They know if the guy loses this match, he's going to drop to like 17th in the world instead of 13th. Or if he wins this match, he's going to become 8th in the world. They already know this shit, and that's actually kind of cool stuff to have around on a broadcast or something. I would even suggest if you're casters or desk hosts, look at this before the game, because you can even add an extra storyline. You can add something to play. And in fact, if you learn the nuances of the VRS system, which why would you? But okay, we have to. You could even actually, by the way, build a way better storyline, which is like the Game Legion one, which is like, by the way, guys, if they lose this game, they won't be at this next tournament. Bro, that's stakes that we didn't have before. We thought this was just a match. You might even be out the tournament like Game Legion wasn't. So I think actually, again, all modelling and all data, it's just about how much importance do you give it. If you put it in its right place, put it this way, I'll give you that classic saying they say about like alcohol. It's a great servant and a terrible master. That's a modelling for you right there. If that's your master, you're going to be run ragged, mate, because what you don't know is if Nero does just change the dial on the rating, your whole worldview is going to have to change tomorrow. Whereas if instead it was always just like Jarvis suggesting things to you, but you're still Tony Stark in control, bossing it all, then you'll be okay. That's obviously how I imagine myself surfing the HLTV, bring up the data field, show me the Nero rate. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had that much control over it. Like, it's still, like, because it's basically about like local servers. I don't actually have any dials. I wish I did, and then MongoZ would win every MVP ever, obviously. But because I think the other thing with the rating is like you never know when to stop, because these figures we're using is like, win probability, right? But do we stop on just CTVT side and like economy, or do we go every map, every game state, like everything? Like you can literally go down until there's like 100 exact examples, and then you're on low sample side, and it's like it's so difficult. I mean, I'll give you an obvious example
of where the madness comes in, right? Because as you say, you can always get more perfect, but you can never reach perfection. I'll give you an obvious one that would drive you crazy, but you can't do it. It's too hard for now. I already know from stats engines, you can do things like how many opportunities did they even get to get a kill on CT side? Did they ever come to their site? So then maybe it should be how many opportunities relative to the game. But then again, if the team doesn't go there, is that because they're really strong? Because essentially, I'll give you a very quick concept from American football. In American football, if you are like the best cornerback in the league. That's the player who one-on-one covers the best wide receiver, essentially the best offensive player. That player, if they're really amazing, what happens eventually is everyone scouts them and knows it. So you no longer ever throw the ball to the player he's covering. So what will actually happen, believe it or not, Nero, is his stats won't be very good. Except the joke is you then change it so that his stats aren't what he did. It's that his receiver didn't get any yards. But you see what I mean? You can just go forever on that, man. That rabbit hole, once you pull, goes forever.
That'd be really cool to see because I think, for example, like MOUZ wanted to go B against Rain and Kerrigan a lot today, and they might have actually got more ADR because their bomb site was challenged more, which makes the rotator's position more difficult. But like, if it's who's the A player on phase? It's like, I mean, Brokey's there a lot. I guess Frozen,
right?
Or Frozen and Elige, like Elige being there prevents them from going A. That in turn should probably be its own stat because the other team practically made a game plan to just target who they think are the two weaker links on the defense of phase. It didn't work for MOUZ, thankfully, but yeah.
Okay.
It's like people avoiding Jimmy and then losing 1v2s.
Exactly. Yeah. Just like not going to the B bomb side on Mirage because Yimpad's there.
And by the way, the reason I say, look, that'd be something cool to have in the future, but the problem is there's always something cool like that you can keep adding. By the way, that would even have changed history itself. Like, I always used to think, if you want to go way back in time at what I think is the most egregious HLTV snob ever, it is when essentially they did to Nico what they did to Elige this last year. They said, when you were in MOUZ sports, you never were in the playoffs, you just lost immediately. So unfortunately, you can't actually be a top 10 player because you didn't have the stats. Now, what that can't factor for, what we're discussing here was, that is one of the few players ever, I'm not even joking, other players and teams will tell you, if you spotted him on CT, you just went to the other bomb site. Because the logic was, I'll just take my chances against like Dennis and Spiddy or like Nex or something, Yeah, that was real. Like that factor, that means essentially something that he is doing that doesn't show up on a scoreboard was actually warping the entire way the other team played. So you just can't account for these things. Anyway.
It's also about differential.
Yeah, it's all good.
I mean, if it's Jimmy on the other side to Nico, then maybe they hit Nico more.
Right, my good point is actually going to be one that's normally, I don't normally do this style because normally people do this to be like sentimental or do some bullshit. But I'm just going to point this out to people. mzinho from MongolZ is still 17 years old. He won't even be 18 until June. And I actually have to say, this is an example of where I do think you should always control for age when you have critique of a player. Because when MongolZ first came along with this roster, and already remember, they were getting upsets. They didn't usually make playoffs very often. And by the way, so far, whenever they make playoffs, they just get eliminated pretty much immediately. The joke is, when they played Eternal Fire guys, that's the other team that gets eliminated immediately from playoffs. So that's like that shit where when Nico and Simple play each other in a major final, one of them has to fucking win, doesn't it? They can't both choke. So that one doesn't count. So the point here is this. When even people like me last year looked at MongolZ, it was easy to be cynical and be like, right, here's what this team is. Senzu's a stud. He's already going to be great. Blitz kind of frags way better than you'd expect for an IGL and seems to have good control over the team. 9-10's a bit streaky. The Techno guy's just there for vibes or whatever the fuck, or just does all the shit work, I'm guessing. And the mzinho guy looked like the most fragile player you could have. He's someone who clearly had good aim, but man, he could have some mega shit games. But the point is, he was like 16 years old. For real. And I'm not talking 16 like you've been to all those lands that Donk had been to, or you've been in an academy. You've been 16 in Mongolia, bro. You've just joined a team and been thrown into tier 1, going to like Cologne and Katowice and playing G2 and massive teams. So what I want to say is this. If you don't know, for the last sort of like 3 or 4 months, this guy has just cooked. Like his potential is fully blossoming. And unironically, like it's like going to be between him and Senzu now as to who even the best player in the team is. And if people don't know, if Senzu's injury is actually properly healed, this team is going to fucking bang, mate. This is actually going to be like Eternal Fire. This is going to be a true dark horse that can like knock out the potential winner of a tournament. I don't know if they can win. So I just want to make my good point as mzinho. Like this guy is 17 and he is actually tearing up games, mate. Like he is really, and I'm talking against real teams, not like, he farmed the bad teams. He's having some massive games against really good teams.
And the thing is, it's like you said earlier about the overlap. Like, there's nothing between him and Senzu. Like he's the full anchor lurker, like the classic, like overqualified guy that ROPS has become now, and Bitters and players like that, where they've still got some natural aggression in the Monte side, but the ability for mzinho to shine in such tough positions, I think, is also maybe underplayed at times because. Like we know Techno's basically Sanji in this team, but and there's still some other tough roles, and it's not Blitz taking them. I'll tell you that for free. So mzinho with his like 80% headshot percentage is just chilling on these horrible bomb sites, and he has that ability to turn situations into 2Ks that, you know, Snacks on G2 isn't going to do in the same bomb site. And I think that's just a huge part of why Mongols are able to level up this year, is because they have the overpowered anchor lurker that I think every team probably needs these days.
It was really such a shrewd move from Mara to just be as cutthroat as he was with some of the moves on this roster. Like, I mean, the players that he already had before mzinho and 910 were, what was it? They had Bartak briefly, and then they also had,
Didn't they have the Annihilation guy or something? Something like that.
Annihilation was a
He was
while back.
AWPing, but
It was,
okay.
God, what was it? Was like
I
another
think it was
guy that they got.
Hasteka?
Haseka.
Isn't it like
Haseka.
literally his
Yeah,
brother?
Haseka.
One of them
Yeah,
is
Haseka.
mzinho's cousin or brother, right? Or something.
Yeah,
No,
I
by
think
the
it was
way,
his
I believe
older-
wasn't the Hasteka game
Was
one of the
that
better
Bartek?
players as well? I think he was
Yes.
actually even considered one of the stars, right?
Yeah, but then they made a really, I mean, they just made a few shrewd moves. They brought, like, they already had qualified for a major, and then he just went further and deeper into the Mongolian land scene and was like, this guy's going to also be really good. So it's just super impressive that, one, the wealth of talent was actually there for Mongolia,
Yeah.
and two, this is also why I put Mara as like my number 3 coach of last year. It's just like, dude, I don't actually think that they came into the scene this good. Okay, they had to be brought up the right way to improve over the course of a year. Because Senzu's also like a fairly new player for them too, and like him and mzinho have like real possibilities, and even 910. Like, all 3 of them actually have legitimate potential this year if the Mongols keep doing well at these kinds of tournaments to make it onto the HLTV top 20. I think one of them's going to sneak on this year. So for a region that's like, I don't think there's been any East Asian players or Asian players really that have made it. I guess Israel counts, but like, you know what I mean? Like
And Australia, I guess.
Yeah, I guess East. I guess it is East. Yeah. So that's where this is so impressive. On top of that, I like that you bring it up just because I was pressured like by I just on my stream, I guess, for people are like, okay, who's your favorite to win this event? And I think like the Mongols is my number 1. They're kind of having some difficulty with Pain right now to beat them, but like I still have them as like, this is the team I've seen the most consistent success with, and I was kind of thinking like Mongols, Eternal Fire, and FaZe were probably the three teams I thought could win Cluj, and yeah, I think a lot of that's because the injury is healing from Senzu right now. mzinho has leveled up, and you're totally right, Thorin. Like, he's super young, and in the very first Katowice he played, he just bought it out. He was terrible, actually. It was kind of like when Yimpat joined MOUZ at his first Cologne. He just did terribly as well. But we've seen how these players have blossomed over time, and you do need to get acclimated to high pressure situations. Some people seemingly never actually get acclimated, but more often than not, if you're given enough opportunities, you will. But yeah, no, for mzinho, he's just like the full package as this anchor lurker, where it's like he is sometimes individually aggressive. He has kind of that MOUZ quality or bit quality where he can just headshot 2 people in rapid succession, and that gives you a kill instead of somebody like, I don't know, like Zontix actually just fucking sucks at T-sides. Like, he's just bad at him because he just body shots all the time. Like, that's honestly the difference between mzinho and Zontix. Like, I'd rather have mzinho on my T-side lurking out, going for a solo kill than Zontix, even though Zontix has won a major at this point. Like, that's just, like, mechanics matter.
I think the same argument, because 910's got the crazy low hours in the game, right? And sometimes the age doesn't matter much if it's like, it's more about hours in the car, right? Not hours, like miles in the car, right? So I think 910, Senzu, mzinho, they might as well be on the same level of how much room there is to grow still for all 3 of them.
By the way, I definitely agree with you, though, Maui. That is actually the thing that the court should get the credit for. Normally, what you'd do if you found someone like Senzu is just bring him in and have all the other players and just hang on. By the way, that's what all the other teams do. Like, that's what the Australians do when they bring someone in. Normally, you keep the people like, I'd even say the obvious example is they've been like an Eastern MOUZ Sports. Remember, MOUZ Sports had like some canny players initially. They had like the A-Core and a bunch of people, but then they moved on and gambled. And by the way, they gambled a few times. They gambled on the next generation of people and what Yimfat and etc. So those gambles don't always pay off, but when they do, you should get the credit, obviously, because by the way, we diss the fuck out you and say you're an idiot for cutting the veteran if it didn't work and this guy bombed. Right, Maui?
Yeah. Well, no, I was just gonna also say that even though, you know, some of these players, when they come into these tier 1 events, they really stink it up. And so I just wanted to remind everybody, we are sponsored by Mando. So if you're stinking it up at a LAN, you could actually shop Mando using promo code CS2 to get a deodorant that is clinically proven to block odor all day and control odor for up to 72 hours. And a reminder that also all these products are baking soda and paraben free. And
that's very important to me.
Wonderful. There's some wonderful scents such as Bourbon Leather, Cloverwoods, Mount Fuji, and Pro Sport. And I would say that if you're looking for a way to get into Mando stuff, just you get into the starter pack, because the solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice, like the mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and getting free shipping are just a great way to check it out. So if you want to do that, you can use this special offer for listeners, and new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. So that equates to 40% off of your starter pack using code CS2 at shopmando.com. SHOPMANDO.com.
Yes. By the way, the actual wipes ones are also OP for gamers, because you can obviously just put them next to your PC. If you sweat when you're playing like an actual matchmaking game, if you've just been at the PC for too long, if you haven't got time to have a shower, just use the wipe. You just wipe it anywhere. It just works. Right. If we now go
much more
on,
synergy on that than PGL's.
Wasn't bad.
PGL sponsorship.
Wasn't bad.
Yeah. Deodorants are much more synergy than PGL and Perfect World and Durex for a fucking major. So works much better.
I mean, the joke is, if Durex had really been used, it'd be like that photo in Back to the Future. Half the people in the arena would just disappear, wouldn't they? So think it through. Think it through. Well, we're trying to build the viewer base, you fools. The fertility rate's going down. Anyway, kind of an edgy take there, really. Right, what about...
That's why.
That's
why.
It's a pretty good point, though, isn't it? What is your bad point, Nero? What is your bad point?
I think it's the MRQ one, right?
Right. Here's the thing, though. You need to be you're already a mini one, but be a mini Messi also. Because here's the thing: I can already tell people need it explained like they're 5. Just explain very briefly what this is.
Well, I'm on by no means on that level. Of
just a simple version.
So MRQs are the new ways to qualify for the major, basically. If you're outside the top, I think it's 2014 or something, right? It's not even the specifics. Like, I'm not going to go into like a rule book.
No.
The reason I don't like them is because I just don't think they should exist. I just genuinely think if Valve back their ranking system and you think that your ranking system is good, then you don't need these qualifiers, because the whole point of the ranking system is you're rewarding play in the open circuit, right? And it's an open circuit. And the problem is not, and basically they've seen it's some pressure and, the VRS isn't perfect, it's hard to get invites. And then instead of saying, okay, well, everyone should have open qualifiers for at least half the slots in their tournaments or something, which is what I think, like, it's hard to run them. We've seen PGL have some issues with esports all today and stuff, but I think that's a far better solution than deciding major spots on a fucking online qualifier. Like, we're back at this again, because like, we want the major. I mean, I know, there's some people out there who are like FA Cup fans from football and have the opposite view. But for me, the major should just be the best teams in the world. And maybe you can have some regional stuff in there to make it feel like a world championship. That's sure, fine. But for me, I just want to see the best teams in the world all the time. And I think if you're the 25th best team in the world, and you've proven that over a 6-month period in the open circuit, and it's supposed to be an open circuit, right? Then you should go to the major. You shouldn't have to play online games against 500 to prove that you're worthy of a major spot. You've done that in the 6 months, and the ranking system, if it's working properly, will reward the best 32 teams in the world. So I think basically these qualifiers have been invented, and they're like the reverse solution to the problem. I think instead of having these online qualifiers and then you can still pretend that 5 people from like a LAN cafe can qualify for a major, don't do that and say that, if you're Bad News Eagles and you want to qualify for a major, then be good at these open tournaments, consistently qualify through the open and closed qualifiers for Cluj-Napoca or something. But instead, we have all these events inviting all 16 of their teams because they don't want to run qualifiers or don't have the facilities to run qualifiers. And now we have to watch online qualifiers for a major. And I just think this is the RMRs were random enough for me in terms of their results. Like, entertainment, 10 out of 10, obviously. But are you telling me that we had the best 24 teams in the world at the major every time? I don't think anyone would say that. And it's going to be even worse with online qualifiers. And I know it's like a 4-stage major. The top teams are still going to qualify because you're inviting a certain amount. But I would just be so salty if I was one of those teams on the edge who, has proven that they deserve to be, well, not maybe deserve, but they are within the realms of possibility to be at that major, and they've done enough in the last 6 months, and then you lose a couple of online best of threes, and the stickers are gone, just like that. And you've played really well for 6 months. And it's going to cause some shocks, and I'm going to hate it. And I just wish that Valve backs their ranking system enough, or change the actual requirements for tournaments to have more open qualifiers, to have the open circuit work that way round, rather than the major having the actual online qualifiers, basically.
I mean, I don't think the MRQs is a satisfying step for qualification to the major in general. I just think that, like, if it would have been, I mean, the thing is that I don't know how any, or why really any TO, because they do have the option to make these a LAN event, but I just don't see why any TO would ever go about doing that. Like, I don't think, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of any of the TOs, and obviously the disclaimer is that I work with Blast regularly, I work with PGL regularly. I just don't see why they would do this. Like, you're trying to make sure that your companies stay afloat or are profitable, and like, this is one of the ways to cut costs. But I feel like I don't really blame them, because I blame more like what you're saying. I actually throw it higher. You know, it's Valve's decision to even have these as part of the qualification circuit, and so burdening a TO by saying like, you could do this something that is going to be probably, no joke, 1,000 times more expensive, maybe even 10,000 times more expensive, unironically. Like, it's an online qualifier, or you're flying 16 teams, you're flying like actually 28 teams across 3 regions out to multiple areas to play. Like, that's just, come on. No TO wants to do that if they don't have to do that to run the major, which in itself is something where you can make back a lot of the money you do just running the whole event. So why would you incur such extra and kind of unnecessary costs? Like, the people that suffer the most are obviously the teams and the viewers. And really, like, if Valve, and I like your angle that it's just like Valve should be the ones that are saying, no, we do believe in how we've gotten to the point where we have the top 24 teams, top 32 teams, whatever it is, for qualifying through all these stages of the major, and we're just going to live by it. Because I think that the scene in terms of the tier 1 lands that give you VRS points, or anything that gives you VRS points, is fairly well regulated. I'm not going to say that it's completely well regulated. I actually have a point about this in my stuff later, but I just think, like, I think that, it's a good bad point, because I just think that the MRQs sort of, it just feels we're sort of shortchanged. Like, I'm glad that the best teams in the world are getting into the tournament. I actually think like VRS is better in many ways than just having the RMRs, because I am sure that the top 10 or so teams are going to make it. Like, it's annoying when we have a major and a team that's clearly a top 10 team for 6 months suddenly doesn't make it because of an RMR system that has BO1s.
Outsiders.
And then
happened.
Yeah, I mean, there's bad cases from the RMRs, so I'd rather we just get them all in, and I'm kind of like, I guess this is better, but it's still in its own, like, an evil that I wish didn't exist.
The sad thing is, go on.
I was gonna say quickly, like, people always say, "Well, just win your games," and it's like, hey guys,
I hate
like,
that.
A best of 3 is like quite random on land, best conditions. You've known the opponent for 2 days in advance. That's still quite random. That's why it's an entertaining sport. If it was the favorite winning 99% of the time, it wouldn't be an entertaining sport. So putting it online and knowing your opponent half an hour before, like, of course there's going to be random results. And what is the point of a qualifier? The point of a qualifier is to get the best teams to the event. It's not to entertain you. The event's to entertain you, not the qualifier.
Put it this way, on that last point, the idea of, well, if you just win the game, you qualify. There's a reason why in tennis and in football, they sometimes don't play if weather conditions are too bad. They don't go, well, just win the game, bro. The point is the game becomes a different game when you're playing in a bunch of slush and mud. And when in tennis, you can't see because the sun's in everyone's eyes, or there's a fucking hailstorm coming. Like, it's not the same sport at that point. You want to somewhat normalise the conditions that you qualify in. And ideally, what you're pointing out here, which you didn't say explicitly, is you want sort of the way you qualify to be comparable to what you might then do at the event. Because you nailed it, Nero. There's an obvious angle here. First of all, I actually love the theory of VRS. It's what I've actually asked for the whole time, which is essentially tennis world rankings. Because if you have tennis world rankings, the only people who can get screwed are the fringe cases, and spoiler, I care about them the least. Whereas you're right, Maui, it is utterly stupid to imagine that if they didn't have that last chance qualifier for the Blast Paris one, then FaZe Clan, who just won the Grand Slam, wouldn't have been at the last major in CS. Well, by the way, everyone knew if you get them there, they have like 100 times better chance chance to be exciting and do a playoff run than like every team that could beat them in the 3-2 game. Like, that's just reality. So the beauty of this system is, you're right, at a minimum, the top 10 is going to be fine. Those are going to be at least 9 of the top 10 teams in the world, and they're just going to go straight to the major. That part I'm with. The problem is, you could make, you've both addressed it, a very obvious way to control for even the current flaws of VRS, which would be just make the MRQs a LAN qualifier, right? The downside then is, though, this is not a sport where we're all printing money. We're losing money right now. So as Maui says, you're just asking a TO to just spend more money, make a LAN. By the way, it'll have fuck all viewership because it isn't going to be the RMR with all the best teams. It's going to be like teams fucking 27 to 48 in the world who no one wants to play. And then, by the way, some of them wouldn't even have good games on LAN. Some of them have never played on LAN, by the way. And lastly, I'll throw this out there. If you know how entitled teams and players are, they'd also then demand that you also paid all their flights there as well, which is like fucking hell. And by the way, I'll just throw this out at the end. If you didn't make them pay their flights, now you'd ruin all the qualifiers, because now I win the qualifier because lol, why don't I try anyway? And at the end, sorry, I can't afford to fly to the event. Like, my God, the amount of worms you're opening from this can is so bonkers. So here's the 2 ways I'll do it, Nero. I agree with you. In an ideal world, I'd say do the LAN qualifier to get the last couple of teams, just to make it so you could do the miracle run, but it's still legit. It's online. You have to beat the other contenders and challengers, and then you get there, right? But here's the thing. If you're Valve and you believe in the FA Cup model, which you ran for the last 10 plus years of majors, you foot the bill for that MRQ. By the way, you're the one printing money from the game. You foot the bill, and I'll see how much you believe in that idea that, there really is that, like, as you say, the equivalent of a non-league team could actually go to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. Well, then you fund that, mate, because the rest of the scene shouldn't have to fund that. We're trying to be like the Premier League. You don't just let a bloody team just randomly qualify to the Premier League from a non-league region. It'd be so stupid. And then also, the other angle is, same thing. Put your money where your mouth is on VRS. If you believe it accurately actually tells us who the top X teams are, and remember, as with the Valkyries case, you're forcing these TOs to invite teams that make the placings on your ranking. They don't get a choice to eye test, look and go, I don't know if I want that team or I want this team for sponsorship. You're making them invite them. So similarly, that should be the same for your major then, mate. You're the one who made your bed, lie in it. And then I'll just say, I agree with you. If you were going to use online qualifiers, you don't do it at the end of the funnel. You do it at the beginning of the funnel. And I can tell you right now, 1 million IGLs and coaches are cheering me on from fucking Valhalla as I say this. They want you to make the open qualifier to the real fucking circuit. Then you get into Katowice after showing you're really good and winning your 9 bullshit games. And then the idea is then you're placing at Katowice and other tournaments gets you into the major. And the point is, that's the end of the funnel. You're making this like someone can just skip round via online and get into the major itself. And lastly, here's why it's not just win your games, Nero. Because we all know there are teams that are notoriously not that good online, who are demons on LAN, and vice versa. I'll give you an example. It isn't even to diss them. They're just always working with new talents, a rotating door, and they're actually from a region that doesn't get to go to LANs. Nemiga, a Belarusian team, were fucking demons in those CCTs and stuff, mate. If you ever watched an online cup, they were always in the bloody semi-final. I bet loads of times I've won on these guys over much bigger names, because I would just look and you would just see that they had like 75% win rate on 2 maps or something. The problem is that you never saw them at LANs. You never saw this team have to mix it up against real teams. And so I imagine if you would have put them on LAN against a team that, by the way, they would beat online, like OG probably beat them. That's just reality, I'm afraid. That's actually just how the game is. So I'd rather qualification for the major resemble the conditions of the major. Then if you do make a run, I've always used this example, so I'll go back in time 11 years to when we actually made 10 years rather, when we actually had the first LAN qualifiers that were for the major, because before that it used to be online and top 8 made it. When they made the first LAN, I've always given this example, so I'll do it one last time. You had 2 teams, it wasn't even regional, they made 1 mega LAN qualifier, and famously 2 teams that were little underdogs made it to the major and proved it by beating European teams. You had Chad's Renegades Vox MNR team came and beat real teams, qualified to the major, so I would have told you it has to be better than them, but then they lost to them. And Fallen's Keyd Stars / Kaboom, they went as well, they beat real teams, they qualified. As long as the conditions look comparable, then we can accept the result. The real problem is no one wants to see an online one. And lastly, I'll just throw this out there. As you're seeing very topically right now on all the forums, the real problem you have with online play as well, where it can't be policed as well, is absolutely there are semi-pro teams cheating and or match fixing. That is a very real thing that pros themselves, when they're the ones affected by it, will blast all over their social media like they are doing now. And I'm sorry, if they're going to do that in a normal game, they'll do that in the major qualifier too. They also just will. And so it's just going to make it a nightmare if you use online shit for this. Like I said, just make the online at the back end of the funnel. There's no problem. It's all good then.
Yeah. So I think just quickly, like, if you're NIP, would you rather have open qualifiers to all the big events or the MRQs? Because if you back yourself and you say, we've built a really good team, you back yourself to make these events.
Yes.
And instead of it being a one-off chance, I think that we should reward good team building that results in consistent teams.
And by the way, I will always say, I'm not a hater of fucking BNE. I'm not a different person who's on one of my other shows. I have no problem with BNE. That's just a good joke, innit? My problem with BNE was always this. They were never, ever actually the team that was going to make the playoffs and then make a run. They were just the banana skin that FaZe could slip on each time. And the real reason why that is because they just weren't actually that good. That's why, people actually believe, bro, that they only played the majors and RMRs. They were playing all the other tournaments. They couldn't fucking qualify. They literally could not ever make it through. And by the way, I know none of you watch CS at Tier 2 because they did go to those like ESL challenges and stuff. And they were not winning them all, by the way. They were not performing like they did against bizarrely FaZe Clan at those two majors. So I always thought that was like the example in the same way as I hated on Jame for the rating 2.0. That was always my example of like, this is like the worst example of getting a team through your system that has no business being there, never will do anything. They never been. By the way, remember, the same majors they're doing all this shit to FaZe are the ones where Into the Breaches and the playoffs and Game Legions and the final and Apex and they never did any of that shit. They never did any of it. If you just watched them play, they weren't even bad players. They just weren't a very good team is the key concept. Anyway, now let's go on. Maui, what is your bad point?
Yeah, my bad point is just something that I felt like was going to happen with the introduction of what's supposed to be a new open circuit, and something that I feel like would have made VRS work so much better, because a lot of people have identified that in this new VRS system where like 8 or 16 teams or whatever the number is gets invited based off of ranking alone, it's just that we're kind of seeing the same teams invited over and over and over again. And at present time, we are seeing that the top teams, like the only way a tournament differs in who plays it is if teams bow out. And so, for example, that's kind of what's happening here in Cluj. It's that, Spirit, Vitality, Navi, G2 decide to not go to it for various reasons. And then we get a few teams that are coming in from the bottom. Like, we're getting a couple teams like Wildcard or FlyQuest or Complexity even, maybe, and like Saw. Like they're kind of at the tail end of these invites. But what I think is bad is that the scene, what's bad is we are not getting TOs running concurrent events. What I think the VRS system needs to make this a lot more open is we need concurrent events. And so I think the TOs actually need to challenge each other in a way where, for example, IEM Melbourne, let's just say 300K prize pool, a lot of the top teams go to it. I would love if PGL just says, we're running another tournament, same time. Like, no, we are going to cannibalize the calendar against each other, because what I would want is that the teams that don't want to fly all the way to Australia to have an alternative, and then Melbourne, I forgot how many teams it is, like 16 or something like that. It would be nice if PGL then runs their own concurrent event for 16 teams, because then you'd have, like, say, 6 teams that drop out of the Melbourne event because it's so far away. A different prize pool is there because PGL loves their big prize pools. And then some teams would say, okay, we're going to stay in, let's just say it's Serbia. Let's just say it's Belgrade or something like that for another 16-team event. And this would give opportunities to like the M80s, the ENCs, the Fanatics, the teams that are like right there on the cusp who aren't getting into these like initial 16 invites, but they're right beneath them and could actually do damage and then could move up their rankings, because it's so arduous for a lot of these teams that are outside the top, essentially the top 24. If you're out of the top 24, it's so hard for you to even get in. Like how does like ATOX get in? Like they've been on the cusp for this entire time and they just can't get an invite because they're like 23 or 24, 25. It's just like, I want to see them get in. Like that's what I thought this whole system was going to allow, because they've grinded up through the ranks in their own region to be right there, but then they don't actually get the LAN chance because there's no more slots available because they're right outside it. So my bad point is, I actually want the TOs to cannibalize the calendar against each other a little bit more, and that they're not doing it because everybody's playing so nice. And I think that eventually they need to just say to each other, like, okay, we don't need to play nice anymore. Like, you got, like, certain TOs are doing things with like soft exclusivity and like membership programs that should actually incentivize other TOs to say, okay, like we know we're not going to get Navi. We know we're not going to get Vitality. We know we're not going to get G2. So let's just run a tournament anyways, because the calendar, I don't want to. Oh God, it's like I could go even further on this because it's like the things that the TOs are doing, where they're not technically overlapping the calendar, but they're making travel impossible. Like they're making it literally you can't get from Melbourne to the next event because it's like
That's intentional, by the way.
Yes, exactly. That's what I mean. It's intentional.
Yes.
So just go harder instead of trying to pretend to play nice. That it's 12 hours apart from the end of our last match to the beginning of your next match. Like you can't physically get there. So just play a tournament at the same time, and we're gonna see the VRS ranking actually play out better. So that's my bad point. We're not seeing TOs run concurrent tournaments as much as we should in what would make the system more open.
I think de facto we're kind of getting that though. Like I think, like you were saying with the travel stuff, I think I'd rather have them kind of sandwich, like basically fuck over the other media day. So like Astana and Dallas, like one starts the day after the final, right? And then it's the same for, I think it's Belgrade and Chengdu. So PGL they've parked the tank on ESL's lawn for those two events basically. And I'd rather have it so that teams have to choose between them, but they're on at different times, because then I can watch both and we can care about both and the narratives will still be there for both, but you're doing the same thing. Whereas PGL next year have just announced an event during Blast Bounty, and there's just going to be two events on at once, and it's going to be like 2017, and oversaturation is going to be like the buzzword of the month again, and it's just going to be a tiring discussion again. So I actually think, in a weird way, the soft version of doing it, which PGL have done with Dallas and Belgrade, means that we're still going to get those event splits, and we're still going to see lots of different teams at those two events without two events being on at once, because I think everyone just hates that, really. It just hurts both of you. So this is harming team lists, but it's not harming, hopefully, viewership as much as if it was literally at the same time.
Basically, I know what you mean, Maui. I want it to be like watching fucking Succession, and every week it's like, what are they going to pull now? Well, then we pull this back to them. Well, then we're going to fucking do a hostile takeover. Oh, yeah? Well, I already got a guy who's going to provide you with the funds to invest in my shit instead by promising him some future stuff. I want it to be like that. I agree. At this point in time, why try to play nice? The key thing is Valve's basically said, I won't let anyone dominate the calendar. But aside from that, like Valve always does, just sort of play nice and we'll stay out of it. You're in the sandbox. Well, at that point in time, throw some sand in someone's fucking face, kick them when they're down, trip them over, whatever. Because I'm with you. NER0cs doing that from the most insanely self-indulgent perspective ever. Like, but I can't watch two events at once. First of all, mate, VODs exist and you can rewind them. Sorry, Twitch TV, that's actually a feature. So you can watch all those games. And also, stop watching fucking FlyQuest play and actually watch the good teams play. You know, I don't think you really watch all the bottom of the Premier League, but you watch fucking Real Madrid versus Barcelona, El Clasico, don't you? So it actually can run concurrently, bro. You just watch the good games, innit? Or just understand that in your life you can't watch all the games and make your bullshit AI model Jarvis to watch it for you and go, Jarvis, what happened in that game? And then there you go. I've solved your problem. Just do better AI models, bro. Anyway, the reason why I agree with Maui, I want more tournaments, is because that actually does fix the problem for the NIPs of the world, which is if you're the teams who don't make this top 24, and at the moment, if it wasn't for the fact that these TOs are trying to step on each other's toes, and did I trip over and just actually knock your dinner off the table? The reason they're all doing that is because they all want to have the same 24 teams. In fact, the VRS system incentivizes it, and obviously viewership incentivizes it. So in the same way as they all hire the same talent, even though we all know they should probably make themes and battle each other, because they all want to be like, yeah, but I don't want to be the one who doesn't have the one you want to watch. So similarly, at the moment, they're not going to do this, but I low-key do wish there was something almost equivalent to when you'd have like a DreamHack Summer, which could be like halfway between the tier 2 scene and the tier 1 scene. And then the idea was, if someone didn't qualify to, I don't know, Star Series, they could go to that tournament that was starting a day before or a day after, because then if you are the NIP or the Imperial Male team, maybe you go to that LAN, as opposed to, if you don't know right now, the nightmare of VRS is, it's not even just like win the games, bro. It's like you almost have to be like fucking Navi on LAN last year, but in online cops to get into these things. You have to like win like 5 in a row or something and like never drop a game. And God forbid you ever lose to a bad team or lose early. Like you just throw all your points in the bin again, because remember, it's like, again, we won't go into it, but part of how these tournaments work, which I think is the flaw in the weighting at the moment, it's actually how the female angle worked to qualifying, is it's not actually that as much of an elo system as you think. It's more like where you place within the tournament that has that prize purse and all the rest of it. So the problem is they are the fucking NIP 87 and 0 Nero, if you don't know, of their female scene. So they're always first in a tournament with loads of prize money. So it treats that like, hey, this is pretty fucking good, and gives them loads of points. And now look, Valve, if you read the actual fine print, it turns out I didn't know this. I read the fine print. That actually is a feature, not a bug for Valve. They actually said they're fine with you restricting based on region and gender. That was literally in the rules. I actually wasn't aware that. I thought this was an oversight. So anyway, to bring it all the way back, at the moment, it's really, really hard to get in if you're not in those top teams. That's why at the moment, the most obvious example is this, right? On paper, both NIP and Heroic have quite similar, exciting teams that could be good. But the reason why Heroic is loving life is they cynically signed 3 players from Sangal, one of whom they've almost already, we've talked about on a past episode, signaled in every single way, the second we don't need this guy, we will drop him and bring this other guy that bizarrely we've signed for years and years and years, but isn't in the team. And then he, fight his way into no, he'll just be in the team. What they're saying there is we actually only wanted 2 Sangal players, but we needed 3 for the spot. NIP took the opposite gamble and said, you know what? Fuck buying the 3 players and being cynical. We're actually going to believe that Snappy and these guys can just win their way through this insane gauntlet and get there. And if they do, God bless them. But I have to say, I think they've chosen, and that's like some Sisyphean task for them. So on that angle, I'll just bring it back to, yeah, I sort of agree. I think it's a good angle there.
I think it's the same. It's the same solution as the last point though, where it's. I think you just have open qualifiers for these events, and then you get the variety and you get the opportunities.
By the way, that's one thing that people don't seem to get.
All 16 teams.
Why does it have to always be one or the other? Like, by the way, when I say open qualifiers, I don't know what you're meaning. I'm meaning like 1 or 2 slots. I'm not meaning like make half the field open qualifier and then half invited. Still invite, like say you have 24 teams, Nero. Invite 22 from the VRS and make the other 2 just open qualifier. That's enough spots for the NIP team to get in if they're legit,
Yeah, I mean maybe like 2/3 or something, so you can have regional split as well.
Okay.
Because then maybe we do see ATOX, right? And I think Pro League is probably going to be an example of that because ATOX have qualified.
Right.
But it's just because you need, like, people glorify the open circuit. And I think maybe my last point makes me sound quite like pro Super League vibe because I do just want to see the best teams. But I do think any system where basically NIP should have just signed Story instead of Wrinkle, even if they think he's a worse player.
Essentially.
Yeah.
And it's like any system that rewards you signing worse players just for points. Like it just feels like there has to be a way of making like your individual points because I think NIP actually thought they were going to get like a bit of a gimmick because they won that Katowice LAN. I saw some people talking about it in like the Liquipedia Discord or something, and they thought that would count as like a wildcard invite. So I think they thought they were going to get more invites than they did. I don't think they really planned the whole.
I can tell you the reason why Threat did that.
They must have thought they'd get more.
The reason why Threat did that Feed the Troll episode is because basically NIP was also getting fucked by this weird thing where they kept like retroactively withdrawing VRS points when you already started playing and then giving it to tournaments that you decided not to play because they didn't have VRS. So the other thing was there wasn't even any game plan. You couldn't have known you couldn't have known, oh, it's okay if we get through these 3 LAN. No one knew what was coming next is the problem.
Do you know what they should do as well? I think because like Epic LAN and Launders LAN.
This is going to happen.
Like, Valve are pretty open.
Yep.
These are ranked events.
They are.
Why aren't NIP going and winning Epic LAN?
Put it this way, that is what essentially MozInho said that will happen, is that people are going to cynically go to UK lands that have all right prize money and just farm points, because why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Kind of sick for the local LAN operator.
Sure.
That you're getting these top teams, and then your broadcast is going to actually pop off, probably.
Yeah, or way more than the local teams. Of course, no one watches the
definitely going to suck for the teams that sign up and pay to get into them and then just get owned. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, in a way, you are also.
Because you know that one kill.
No, but that's also
you
the
know,
joke.
like if you're playing it snappy, 1 kill just wins. That's the best moment of your life.
Yeah, you will feel great actually.
It does feel good for you, but at the same time, you notice what you're doing there. Everyone always ignores is you've fixed a problem in your like closed circuit by just stepping on the head of UK open circuit at that point in time. Like that UK land's supposed to be won by a UK team. It probably the best UK team, but now the joke is they have to play NIP in the final and go, what the fuck? Like they're about twice as good as us. And they have no chance whatsoever, do they? So the joke is he would just get the 1 kill. That's his prize. 1 kill instead of the trophy in €2,000 or whatever it would be. Right, okay, we'll now go on to my bad point. And this is, if you think your points were self-indulgent, get ready to just enter. Basically, here's what grinds my gears. You don't even have to give a fuck. You might even have a take on it. So it's people in the scene. You might know I have spent a lot of my career stressing and emphasizing how the veto and how teams approach the veto and how people even do things like intentionally have to move away from a strong map for them if it's too strong for the opponent and go to like a middle ground and stuff. If you notice, one of the reasons I've emphasized that so much is because people for real in CS used to act like the veto didn't exist. So, and the problem I have is this, people are still doing it. And so what I'm going to say is this, everyone, the second that HLTV have made the original thing that showed you the minimum three maps over the last 3 months, that little graphic made everyone think that quick cheat sheet is all you need, and that makes you understand the veto. So what I'm going to say is, it's bad that I think most people don't care about the veto and are actually fake pretending they do care or know how it works. So I'm going to give you a couple of very quick examples. One, I actually made a whole Thorin versus Reddit episode about this, where I found the most incredible Reddit thread I think I've read in years. If you read this thread, Maui, you would never lay awake one more second in your life worrying about people on Reddit think about you and your knowledge of CS. Here's what the thread was. It was a thread of, listen, Madja from fucking Eternal Fire saying, like, we shouldn't have gotten rid of Vertigo, guys. This train is not good. We should have kept Vertigo. Now, I'm thinking when I open this thread, everyone's a know-it-all on Reddit. That's how you get the updates. I am not sure. I showed the whole thread days later, Maui, on stream. Not a single comment in the entire thread points out Eternal Fire loved Vertigo and it was their most played. It was never pointed out ever. Yeah. Nobody even said, well, obviously, you'd say that. No, and that implies, think about the implication, bro, this was a massive thread. That implies all those people on Reddit telling you don't know the game and Kassad's a moron and NER0cs just biased towards MonteCristo. They don't even know what maps Eternal Fire likes or is good on or chooses to play. They don't even know that basic context, but they're in every thread giving you their opinion. And then lastly, not only fans do this, but I won't say by name, but I'm calling out some of my friends who are commentators here. Listen, I get that you don't want to be like, no big deal, guys, let's see on map 2. But you are doing the noob HLTV forum shit that sometimes people probably are even trolling by. You're doing it on broadcast, which is, and the obvious team that's making me think of this is Falcons, because I've seen this happen so many fucking times with this brand new Falcons lineup. Here's what you do. Because you know it's popular to shit on Falcons if they lose, because everyone hates them for having too much money and basically being, if you know the analogy, like the fucking Everton of fucking Pro CS, where it's like they should be way better with how much they've spent in the history of the team, but they're shit, aren't they? So because we all know it's popular to say they're shit, here's what you do. Falcons enters a series. The opponent's map pick is map 1. They just don't win it. Oh, fucking hell, it's over. The shit team. They'll never win. By the way, this was literally done today before Falcons just came and won the series. Like, now, what I don't get about that is, if that was a team you knew the veto of, I'll give you the example. You know the best team in the world last year was Na'Vi. They played a fuck ton of best of threes that were 3 maps because we all know if the opponent could pick Nuke against them, they lost a lot of Nuke games, even when they were number 1 in the world. Imagine if I'm the commentator or the fan, Na'Vi, number 1 team in the world, can't fail to make the final, plays against, pick any team that's decent on Nuke, by the way. I won't even pick a top team. Saw, there's an obvious one. They actually lost one to Saw one time at Cologne. Let's say they play Saw and map 1's Nuke, and Saw flukes the Nuke game. Let's say it's 13-11 or OT. Imagine the commentators go, well, it's pretty much it for come back after the break. By the way, already the most cursed line in casting. Na'Vi's 1 map away from elimination. That's like saying I was 1 world war away from losing my whole empire, you fucking shitter. It's an entire world war. Like, a map is a map. It's a whole fucking, it's not a single unit of players. It's a whole map. And by the way, when you're Saw and you win on Nuke against Na'Vi, you are the one who still has the whole of your work to do, my friend. They can almost rely in that scenario of like, it's like you finished serving and I'm the best server in the world. I think I'll just score a few aces against you right now and it'll suddenly look really soon like it's quick. So the point I've got is this. 1, people just ignore the veto, but then they simultaneously act like everyone knows it and it's obvious and we're all experts. Like, if you don't know, that's one of the things about the veto is it's a lot of actual homework if you are the analysts who try to go deep on that, because as you might see on my videos, you don't really pull up that HLTV thing. What you try and do is this, NER0. You try and relate it to what psychologically the teams are doing. So, for example, what I will do, if you see me point out a Carrigan veto, is I don't just go, oh, he picked his 4th worst map there. I go, he actually intentionally has never vetoed this the last 8 times, so the opponent could never guess he might pick it now, but he's also looked for an angle where they looked like dodgy 2 maps ago on it when they played a different opponent, and that's why he's now going to pull that out now. That doesn't show you that from that graphic. So I think people just pretend the veto doesn't exist and CS is CS, but I've never understood that, mate, because it is like actually surfaces in tennis or home and away games in the NFL, etc. The veto does so much. I mean, I think Na'Vi should prove that, because, bro, that team was the best team in the world, but holy fuck could they get beaten on Nuke.
Yeah, I think because we've actually added another thing as well, which is
I saw that. It's pretty
something
good.
I've wanted for ages, which is instead of the win percentage, we have pick percentage and ban percentage, right?
That's another thing you need to know if the second ban
that's a more important.
Yes.
Yeah, like if you're trying to predict a veto, you can see the teams that, you know, we just have our map and we pick it no matter the opponent. Because I think it's one of the really interesting parts of teams as the teams that do have the home maps, and they just pick it even if it's their opponent's best map. Like that's an interesting psychological point about a team. And I agree with you completely, because Skybox Edge is really, really good, and it has this veto simulator, right? And then you look at because it's got like, oh, this is our predicted veto, and then you look at their like probability on the side, and it's like 2.4%, and it's like, yeah, you've not got a clue, because it's like, okay, so there's like a 20% chance you pick this map, and then you times that by 7 because you're just predicting like 20% 7 times in a row. It's like, well, no one has a clue then, because it's so much about, and also which teams. I remember, I think, like quite early in my career, I asked Snappy, it's like, oh, you've lost the like last 8 Anubis games, what's going wrong for you on that map? And he just literally looks at me like I've just like shat on his shoe or something, and he just says to me like, actually, if you look, like 6 of them were overtime, we're actually really good at Anubis, and then they just played really well on Anubis. So, yeah,
I love it. Okay.
Thanks, Snappy. Fair enough. So it's like, because there's so much context missing in any percentage, because it's also like level of opposition. So like FlyQuest, they'll pick Inferno every fucking time, but they're like 1-4 on it this year. And even though, like,
by the way, the best example
really
ever is always Brazilian teams. Brazilian teams also play against each other in loads of competitions, so they can always pump the like map score up on a certain map. So the joke is, on the HLTV thing, not HLTV's fault, they can only control for these factors. You will have times where it'll show that like MIBR is like 68% win rate on that map, and the other team, Eternal Fire's only 48%. It's like Eternal Fire's way better, and they play all the best teams. Like, again, I'd have to click and see who they beat, wouldn't I?
Yeah, it's always about that. Like, there's no, like, you can maybe have like a weighted thing of like, oh, if you beat a top 5 team, you get this many points. But what if you just haven't played a top 5 team yet? You're just at 20%. Like it just looks weird. It's not something that's intuitive to people. Yes. I think it's up to you to click on the button that's one click away and be like, okay, which teams have they actually played? Like that's not our fault. It's not hard.
No.
But you know, there's always going to be more context to all these things. Like I even saw someone moaning, it's like, oh, HLTV's rating is broken because Zaz and Senzu have the same rating in the last 3 months. And I'm like, well, they're kind of playing different people, aren't they? Like this isn't like, what do you want me to do about this? Like this is not something fixable. And I think the veto is the same thing. It's I've always wanted to have more on the website, on team pages about the veto. Like if there was a team stats page, I think the veto would be the main thing that I'd want to see on there. Is like, how often are you picking your first map? Like what? Because it's hard to predict, but there's so much data stuff that could be really fun with that. And I bet teams do a lot more than we think about their vetoes.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah, I mean,
go on.
I just think the whole like the veto stuff. I guess there's like a lot of angles to take on this. I mean, thinking about the Falcons Astralis one, we did pick on Falcons quite a bit after that loss, but it was just the quality of the loss and how bad it was after they lost on Ancient was just like, oh, like, because they've even played better teams better on that map in the past, so it kind of felt like they're just regressing instead of actually getting any better. But I think like there's sometimes the discussions are really interesting with vetoes. I guess like my perspective on it is kind of like how it's handled on broadcast, because like sometimes the veto is actually incredibly straightforward. Like I think the second series of the day that I covered today, I think it was Falcon. It might have been actually Falcons Astralis. I forgot. There was some series we covered today was like incredibly straightforward veto, but then another veto, it's like they share a permaban, and when teams share a permaban, that's always like one of the most interesting things for me. Like I love to like then guess who's gonna play chicken with who. Actually it was Falcons Astralis. Like I said, like I think Falcons won this veto because like both of these teams have been banning Anubis, and then Astralis just went and first banned Anubis. It's like you didn't try to float it or anything like that because you thought they might actually pick it first when they've never played it before. Like that's crazy to me. So yep. I guess I just think of it from that perspective. I think like certain games I have no interest. I have very little interest in the veto, and certain games I do. And I think one problem is like I do like to be surprised. I kind of like hold this a similar principle that you did, Thorin, when you were doing analyst desks more, is that like I like to be surprised in the veto, but I think sometimes we should plan the segments a little bit more where it's like I kind of wish I just asked the production, okay, is the veto this exactly? If it is, let's just do it at the very end and kind of gloss over it. But is it not, if it's something different, don't tell me. But then we should just move it up in the segment. Like I guess that should be a conversation we have, because it should be a greater part of the discourse at times. But sometimes it's like they just went with their perma picks and they did their perma bans, and the decider is a handshake map that like they both like don't usually like they'll like sometimes pick. It's like, okay, that's cool. Like, but that doesn't really further the story here. So that's all. That's all the take.
By the way, that's even actually a very good production note, which is the idea. If it's what we default expect anyway, just basically just put it at the end and we'll just go over what they obviously would do. But if someone did like a different ban or a different pick, then don't tell us what, but just throw it up first and let's get into how crazy that is, because that'll spin off its own. Oh, I'm with you on that one. I think it makes sense. And also, the reason why I actually think that graphic thing that you did, Nero, is mega is because, one, first of all, I'm not even joking. CS just isn't that advanced yet, mate. There will literally be teams who will eventually realise, because, by the way, the most powerful thing that is not used in the game, my boy Carrigan is essentially like actually using teams that aren't the best to even make finals using this shit, is just floating when someone will never pick them up. It's like, that is actually one of the most powerful, like, but invisible parts of the veto, is that, like, there's just no way a brand new roster that plays 4 maps is going to pick that, like, 5th map that they don't play when you then don't do the permaban. And if they do, by the way, they might just tank the whole game anyway and lose the game. So, like, that's one area where the joke is teams will start to look at that, mate, and it will actually help some of them out for real. It won't just, it's not what you think that all the coaches do all their homework. They don't. And then secondly, I hope finally it makes fans understand that it isn't just as simple as like, well, all 3 of them are like 60% win rate on these 3 maps, so it'll be those 3 maps. Like, that's not even how people work psychologically. Like, sometimes you want to punish someone on something. Sometimes you think sometimes, by the way, you want to use the very fact you just pointed out. I have seen Vitality a bunch of times have 40 to 50% win rate on a map, but if you clicked who they played like the 3 best teams in the world on that map and won one of those maps. Like, bro, that's not a real number. Like, the other team again was just in CCT beating Namika and Bleed and fucking Team Secret. You know what I mean? Like, that is a different world. Okay. But speaking of being able to take 2 factors into account at once, how about this wonderful Turtle Beach headset? This is the Stealth 700. By the way, it's a straight fire headset, as you can see. I've got a pretty big head. Take my other headphones off. Fits around my ears, though. It doesn't go on them and crush them. It goes fully around. By the way, even just that aspect alone, because it's closed back, almost has like, it takes away some of the outside noise. I can't even actually hear myself talk as well right now. I wouldn't want to. That means if someone was talking in the corridor or drilling above or knocking on a door, it wouldn't interrupt me while I'm gaming. Also, I actually think it's very clever what they've done with the microphone. You can have the mic down like that, but everyone who knows with headsets, the last thing I want to do when I'm not using it is accidentally like hit it. So if you're not using it, just put it up. It just folds right back in. It doesn't stick out in any way. On the back, they've got all these controls here. You can see there's different volume controls for each side. So you can do the volume. One of them's also for like an extra factor, like the game sound or whatever you put it on. Because basically, the key things that are like quality of life upgrades about this headset is, first of all, it's got the industry's first ever cross-play dual wireless transmitter. So you can put like these little thumbsticks into 2 different things at once and then seamlessly using the button switch between them as you're doing stuff. So for example, you could be... or have your console with one and then have your PC with one, and with the click of a button you go between, or you could be on your console and you could like put your phone on and stream music to yourself. Take calls if you're playing like Madden and someone calls you. You can take a call. By the way, imagine listening to your young kids hippity hoppity Kendrick rap while you're fragging people in CS and wide swinging. You could do all that at the same time, couldn't you? So for a limited time only, get 10% off your entire order with code CSGO at turtlebeach.com. Don't miss out. Stay able to do 2 things at once and multitask with Turtle Beach. Now, here's the thing. There's another feature I want to very quickly mention. This is another mega quality of life upgrade. If you're just a lazy nerd like we all are, everyone has that person who has the headset that they're playing and then the battery just dies immediately and you're like, oh, why didn't you charge it? Well, how long do we need now? Like half an hour or something? This actually has also mega charging technology. So it has an insane 80-hour battery life. Think how many days that is, by the way. You don't have to charge it every day. And it's got the quick charge so that if you don't remember to, it doesn't take that long before you get enough time to play for an hour or 2. Because obviously if the battery life, use your brain, if the battery life max is 80, think about how quick charge is now. So probably going to be like, we're talking minutes to do an hour or 2 at that point in time. So I think that's mega actually when you're a gamer, where the problem with wireless stuff in the modern day is people always forget to charge it, or the battery life only lasted 8 hours. This is 80. This is like 10 times more than it used to back in the day. So Grab your Turtle Beach Gen 3 Stealth 700, level up your gaming experience. Head to turtlebeach.com, use code CSGO, it's on your screen, for 10% off your entire order. That's 10% off your order at turtlebeach.com with promo code CSGO. Thank you to Turtle Beach. Thank you to Mando earlier. Thank you to everyone who supports the show by purchasing these products. If they appeal to you and if you think they sound cool, we never ever advertise anything we don't think is good and haven't used ourselves. We actually have turned down certain sponsors that I obviously won't mention because we thought their products were cheap or they weren't good or whatever. So everything we've used is legit. It's all legit as fuck. Right, now we will go on to the last section, which is obviously the ugly. Now, Nero, what is ugly right now in CS?
I think it's kind of a niche role cell complaint, but for a long time in CS, we've always thought, the star players are your passive lurkers and your AWPers, right? So that's always been the way. And I think in CS2 especially, I think it was probably happening at the end of CSGO as well. You want your best player to be, and I think this is maybe just Nico's cultural impact a little bit, you want your best player to be your opener now instead. And I think more and more when you see teams being built, you don't want your aggressive player to not be your best player, because the earlier in the round you can have their impact, the better, right? And I think people still talk about someone like Ema, right? And they say, on T side, it's a difficult role. It's a difficult role to be Ema on T side. And these space takers, actually, it's the highest rating average on most maps. It's the person in the middle of the map taking these duels because they're the ones being set up. And instead of having your in-game leader jump around a corner, now we want our best players to be taking gunfights with the helper utility and stuff. And I think it's just led to generally aggressive players sometimes are actually being a little bit overrated, I think. And I think maybe this is partly our fault because rating 2.1 nerfed AWPers so much while not really adjusting some 25 damage assist things. So riflers have a bit of a helping hand at the moment, right? But this is something where these aggressive riflers can have bad maps and everyone says, oh, it's a hard role. No, I think you need to be looking at the team space taker and the team's AWPer. And if they're not performing, then that's a huge reason why you're losing. Because if you're in a 4v5, right, the round's nearly over. No one wants to accept it, but this is 30%. This is really bad. If you're someone like Xantares having an off game, you lose that game in a way that ROP's having an off game doesn't necessarily lose you that game. So I think there needs to be more scrutiny on aggressive players in the same way that, if Wonderful or Shiro miss a lot of AWP shots, okay, there's 18,000 Reddit threads about them because it's passive AWPers, they just farm rating, they're crap. Sure. But if these aggressive riflers go 1 and 5 in openers on a decider, no one cares. No one notices. It's oh, well, he still had 80 ADR, so he probably had an all right game. It's no, this is your job. Your job is to take map control and make these aggressive lurk timings because they're not entry fraggers anymore. You're basically in the late round, it's the lurkers that entry, and you're still in mid and you've got time to make an aggressive timing play. That's what Xerxian, Ema, Nico, that's what they all do. They become lurkers late round. And that is your star player now. And I think people need to wake up to that fact and start treating more of these players like star players. Obviously we give the star treatment to a lot of them, but I think pretty much every team now, it's also the donk effect a little bit as well, is these space takers are your star players. They're in the star roles on T and CT side. And I think at the moment, people only think of it in a CT side basis.
So what's the succinct
perception that aggressive rifling is harder or worse, but it's actually the opposite. Put it this way, he essentially said it to me in a DM a while ago. In the modern day, when people go, and Donk's doing it from the aggressive, it's no, in CS2, that is better than being the lurker. Essentially, you'd rather be Donk than play F in CS2, regardless of skill level.
Yeah, well, Blaber plays those roles as well, right? He's in those face-taking roles because it's the best place to do the lurks from, I think. If I was going to sum it up quickly, I'd just say, if I was an up-and-coming player, I'd want to be playing space-taking roles. I don't want to be lurking because the lurker is now the support player, right? So ROPS is an overqualified support player, basically, because he's anchoring CT and lurking T. If you're having full synergy and building a roster from scratch, you've got, your third star is now the ROPS type player, and you want your best rifler to be in NER0cs roles. It's the exact NER0cs transition from lurker to space taker, because that's now where you want your best player to be all the time.
Yeah, I have a take on this based off of just kind of I still play a lot of CS. My friends and I we nerfed ourselves. We actually play ESC at intermediate, and we actually just forfeited all of our playoff matches after we we did like a huge upset in the first round of playoffs, but then we're like, oh, we don't actually want to make main because it's a little too try hard. So we just kind of like farming intermediate over and over again. And I'll say like, you know, we've like lightly structured our team. We don't bring a shitload of stuff to the table. We just have like a couple execs. We just like kind of do stuff on the fly, but we have roles. And I will say like nobody wants to op like ever because like even if we play a lot of CS, we all just are like it still feels a little worse than it did in CS:GO. And we all like to we actually all like to like take space. Yeah. Like I think naturally right now it is the best feeling thing to do in CS is taking space. And that's actually different than how I used to view it in CS:GO. Like in CS:GO, I felt like the easiest role by far was lurking, and I like lurking was so easy in CS:GO. Like punishing people that were swinging into your crosshair in that game felt so like it just felt like the head model was bigger or something, and the models moved slower, and it was just more receptive to like holding an angle. But now I don't feel like the game is as good at doing that. Like I don't know if that's a sub tick thing. I don't know if it might be partly the net code or whatever. But I will say like the guy that's like positioned in a lurk position oftentimes has a little bit more trouble than he used to. And the guy, and also the oppers are just like, I'm never really even scared of oppers anymore. Like, I think that's probably like the Smooya effect or whatever in NA. It's like, I don't know, like, or like, it just like, they just don't feel that strong anymore. So, yeah, I guess there's an interesting conversation to be had here that, whereas before I founded a lot of my Counter-Strike, like CSGO principles on, like, aggro rifling and entry fragging is the hardest role in this game. I believed that for like my entire time. I don't know. I think opping's actually gotten harder. I think anchoring's always been hard, but it's extremely hard in CS2. And yeah, I think it's a cool conversation to have because I don't know if rating like is in the wrong. Like I generally feel like when I see rating, yes, like map to map, sometimes I'm like, how did NQZ do better than Davideus here? Like that doesn't compute with anything I just saw on the screen. But he still obviously was good. But for his rating to be better than him, like I'd say over the course of like a significant sample size, like 10 plus maps, I feel like I will generally agree with it on like 80% of the maps for who was the most impactful player. So I think it's generally in the right there. But I don't know. Like I guess aggro riflers being overvalued. I still think it's the most important thing in the game. Like if you get like winning a 1v1 versus winning a 5v5 opening kill, I kind of like the guy that's getting me the 5v4 all the time because then my chance to win the round is like 80% if I'm a really good team. So
yeah, I think that's kind of the exact point. I think is that is what you want your best player doing now. You don't want them to be waiting for your less skilled players to die. And I think the flip side I probably didn't emphasize enough is that I do think passive AWPers are generally kind of underrated in the community now. I think maybe because I think it's too easy to hate on someone like Shiro. When getting one kill around and not dying is like you're just making your team so much better. Yeah. It's insanely valuable. And like it's an expensive gun. I don't want wrinkle jumping around corners.
Yep.
I want my best players to be riflers because the AK is the best gun in CS2.
Yes.
And then I want my AWPer to be a stable player that I know I can rely on. And yes, if you're missing loads of shots, then I think, you know, like that's obviously really bad. But for someone like Shiro, who is so good on a rifle as well, and I think someone like Shiro is underrated. Like that could have been a point as well. I think it's the classic overshadowed by Dunk thing, but yeah. I had a quick look at the last few points, but
pretty sweet. It was essentially like he's the Russian device argument, if you know the old one.
Yeah, I remember
that's
that.
That's why Yanko dislikes Shiro also.
That's why Yanko does. It's unironically the same argument. Yes, it's the same preference, exactly.
Yeah.
Because you have to understand,
from scratch.
Yanko's doing that thing, by the way, where he's just doing his machismo fucking Serbian thing of like, he's a fucking pussy, just fucking, bro, just take the peak. Like, listen, but that's what we love about Yanko. He also has his own personality that we know all the idiosyncrasies of it.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. I think, and this is another thing for rating, is that, like, the new rating, like, win probability on its own makes mincemeat of these riflers because it just doesn't, like, if you just give away a 5v4, it just hates you forever, basically. So I think I'm going to have to look at it and find ways to reward aggressive players much more than Leafy does, for example. I think that's the key balance we want to strike is between overrating, well, not overrating, but getting that balance between AWPers and riflers a little bit better than 2.1 does or Leafy does, because I think there's a world where you can overrate either of them, and it's very difficult. But yeah, I think it's the device fan of me as well. Like I do like passive authors. I just do like it. I think if I was building a team from scratch, I'd want a passive author. I'd rather have crazy riflers and then have an AWPer as a closer. Because what would you rather have in a clutch? You'd rather have an AWPer most of the time.
There's a reason Cadian did that the whole time.
Yeah, like he's betting his tits off. But if you're going to win 1v3s every other map,
it
then
works.
Sure, like why not?
Yeah.
It works.
By the way, on that angle, that's the area where it's hilarious that people like pick up slogans. So you know how all the talent kept saying, like, it's not CSGO anymore, bro, about all the great players who dropped off, oftentimes, by the way, because they were passive players, they were lurkers, etc. What's hilarious is the same people then just went, like, what is it called? The Gelman effect or whatever, where when they just looked at all the players doing well, we're like, and these are the best players in the world. It's like, do you actually imagine, by the way, if you watched CSGO, Spinx was a much better player than Flames. But the reason why you think Flames is better than Spinx is because his role is more apt to actually get all these fucking frags and to take over a game and look like the reason they won the map. Think of some of these players that were like the best players last year. So you had Nico, Donk, Exertion, Flames, like... I know people in teams would tell you, like, maybe they think Imfat's better than Exertion. Maybe they think Spinx is better than Flames. But the point is, the stats reward and also having a big game and the eye test. When people say that, by the way, they mean I saw something exciting, a highlight. The problem with Shiro is the OP thing he does is what you don't see, is that he doesn't die needlessly. That sounds shit, but there's a reason why. I had a famous saying about Device, that he is like every coach's wet dream AWPer, because he never ever does the stupid peak that he just gets killed instantly, like on the shoulder when he's on Inferno or something. And then also, he doesn't just pointlessly go for a 1v4 he can't win. He saves every AWP and you just buy like 2.5 less AWPs every game. You have to understand, people like Zonic cream themselves over shit like that. That's unbelievable. Like the floor raising you're doing there and like the holes in the boat that you're plugging are fucking nuts. But yeah, I agree with you. Essentially, this is why we also have to consider that CS2 is different from CSGO. Because if you played CS2, if you put the CS2 engine into CSGO, we go back in a time machine, it's just CS2 from the beginning. I can tell you a couple of things immediately that would happen. So you know Forrest, he's actually the GOAT of CSGO initially, not Get Right. Then if you go into that coldzera team, you know when coldzera won everything, Fur is the best player in the world, mate, not coldzera. Like, Fur was fucking unbelievable at the shit he was doing. But the point is, in those games, that's where MOUZ right. That actually was where you were doing the harder role. That was the role that was less rewarded, and it just wasn't as OP. Like, actually, the guy holding the angle kills Fur a bunch of times when he goes around that corner. So yeah, I agree with the point in general. By the way, just because you snubbed him from his EVP, I'll even point out, to give one last example, believe it or not, Apex, even when he was a mega entry fragger, the best in the world, never ever won a single HLTV MVP. And that's because back then he had Shocks or Kenny S or fucking even MBKs, like a lurker. Like, you have to understand, he had some performances where he would just drop like 25 on 2 T sides. Like, that would have been like MVP or EVP in this modern world. Like, he would have actually been rewarded for being the exertion of his day, if you don't know. So, right, if we go now, Maui, what is your ugly point?
My ugly point is pretty simple and straightforward. It's just that the PGL Cluj-Napoca, again, disclaimer, I am working the event, but also it's like, I think this is something that it wouldn't even matter. It's just that the PGL Cluj-Napoca format is better than the Majors format. That's my ugly point.
So BO3 Swiss is what you want. Full BO3.
BO3 Swiss with BO5 major grand final.
Right.
I think I mean, the way that this is playing out, we're getting the right teams winning. Like, I feel like the way that it's broken down so far in terms of who's 3-0, who's 0-3, like who's 2, like it's very light on upsets. I'll just tell you that. Like, even if you look at it in terms of ranking, it's almost perfect right now. It's almost perfectly the top 8 teams are there, and the top 8 teams, I mean, are in like the 2-1 or 3-0 categories, and the bottom 8 teams are outside of it. I think the only literal exception via VRS rank is Pain is like 1 higher than Astralis. But if you kind of been watching closely, I think people would think that like Astralis's VRS rank is a little bit fake. It's like it's just kind of a remnant of things from the past, you know? So all in all, I think it's playing out exactly how it should be. And I think that the fact that it just sucks right now that I think we're going backwards in like the crowning jewel event of the season will still be the major, but the format that is giving us the best results possible is probably what PGL is putting out right now. Like, I don't see how. I think this is hyper competitive in terms of, yeah, sure, we don't have the best teams. That's a different conversation. I'm just saying that the best format is this. Like, if you're doing 16 teams, Swiss with an 8-team playoff bracket single elim is one of the sickest things you could possibly be doing right now. So I think that when we get to the Austin Major, it's gonna feel a little bit hollow in comparison, where we're so used to watching these really competitive formats. Like even Kato, even Kato's format I think it's better than what we're getting at the Major. And I think that Valve needs to just wake up to the fact that we have the capabilities to do these kinds of tournaments. Like we can do, I know like before in the past it was like, oh, we want to do the BO1s because it like eliminates a day, but it's like we just added like 5 more days to the Major anyways. So clearly we can do it. And I don't think the TOs are even against doing that necessarily. Whoever is hosting the Major probably wants the extra viewer hours. Like that's how you make money from a stream. You get more watch hours. So I don't know why they wouldn't. If they're running a tournament at a profit, then they want more hours. And I think many of us as CS fans, and the more hardcore ones especially, just want the most competitive format. So yeah, I think the ugly point is the Major is going to have a worse format than PGL Cluj-Napoca.
I think the key thing is the best of threes, right? Because I think it was Lerpus did it like literally years ago. Is like statistically a best of 1 and best of 3. Like the difference isn't as big as you might expect for the favorite winning, but it's the feeling you get when you're watching. Like if an underdog wins a best of 3, it means like, well, they've got a deep enough map pool to win a best of 3, first of all. And it just means so much more watching an upset that's a best of 3. Like if someone had upset and was 2-0 at PGL, it's like, well, you've won best of 3s against good teams. You deserve to be there. At the Major, there's these asterisks on underdogs, and it doesn't feel like they've earned it as much as they would do in a tournament like this. And I think that actually is annoying for the teams as well, because it's like, well, we've earned it, but because it's best of 1s, everyone just writes them off. Whereas now, I think
I will bring
it
up
just
quickly,
benefits
like,
everyone.
Lurpus's BO1, BO3 thing, though, surely that's in MR15 instead of MR12, right? Like when he was
years ago. It was like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So
it was MR15, and I know that you guys, I think it might have been you making an article about MR12 and the chance that you win or whatever, but it's still, I guess the feeling, but like MR12 BO1 is inherently more random than MR15 anything, So just saying.
Yeah, and it definitely is, but I also think that's just made best of 3s more random as well. I still think that the difference wouldn't be as much as you think, and I think it's the same for best of 5. But it's it's an entertainment product as well, and I want underdogs to feel like, I want upsets. At the end of an upset, I want to go, okay, fair play, that was a good game. It wasn't just you won the 4 key gun rounds where teams both had no money like that. And that's MSL was a different ugly point in itself, but yeah, I think I'm really liking the format, and I hate it when teams skip stages. I just hate it so much. I hate teams starting in semi-finals. I hate teams winning 2 best of 3s and just being on like a lucky side of a bracket, and then the lower bracket at Katowice, for example, it's like 5 best of 3s or something. It's just who you're playing. It's just how the seeding lines up for you, especially now teams are using VRS for seeding, which is just bringing us back to nightmare days for some of these events. But yeah, overall, I think 100% agree. I think this format is way better.
Right, the real problem with that Lerpus one is Lerpus himself is someone I used to have the same idiosyncrasy, who doesn't actually control for intangible factors that can't be represented in the game in the same way. So, for example, I can tell you what he did when he did that. He just took a bunch of tournaments, took all the BO1s, looked at who the higher seed was, ran the numbers of did they win the game or not, then did the same thing with BO3s. Right, I'll tell you an immediate way he didn't control for an obvious factor, which is in tournaments where you only had BO1s in the group stage, that was most of the early days, that means BO3s are already playoff games between top teams. That's all. You've already actually changed the quality of the teams participating. BO1s is everyone. So that's number 1 team in the world against number 16 or number 24. So here's an obvious problem with that. BO1 is just the same if you run the numbers. Here's the thing. Just you tell me. If you don't think so, you can disagree on this one. It's totally fine. I just find it almost impossible someone wouldn't agree with the point I'm about to make. Here's the difference. Yes, I imagine if you have the 14th team in the world play the 22nd team in the world in a BO1, it's probably not a massive qualitative difference, especially in MR15, as to whether they win the BO3 or the BO1. But I'll tell you what, if you have the 24th team play against the number 1 team in the world, I actually think that it is insane to imagine that it would be vaguely similar to win a BO1 in even MR15 over a BO3. Like, surely we can see there's a difference between the quality of those two games. And as far as I know, he did not do like when a massive seed plays the worst one. Because by the way, that would be interesting. If he showed me every time team number 1 played number 16, that actually in BO1 it was similar to when they played in Star Series and it was BO3, 2-3, then I'd say fair play. Maybe you got something there. But I actually think that's an example of where, look, there's an obvious motivation here, which is it's cool to be able to say, actually, we don't need the BO3s. We can just stick with BO1 as it is. It's not a problem. It allows all these TOs to do 3-day events like they used to back then. There's actually it's a contrarian angle too. Every fan's going, it's random. And then you're going, because by the way, people who like stats hate people saying random. What you mean by random is there's just a higher chance. When you say random, that actually is, if you don't know, guys, random just means it contains every possible pattern. There is no logic or pattern to it. So what we really mean is it's just higher variance. That's a better term to use. So to very quickly address this, I agree. I think this is way better. This is why back in the day, all the TO talent used to go, why the fuck are you going to Star Series? And I used to go, bro, you know the tournament is BO3 full Swiss. Like, it's straight fire. It means, by the way, if you ever saw those 2-1s in 2018, where the one where Simple lost to MOUZ, the next one he came back and they won over like SK and MOUZ and NRG. Like, that's why he's the GOAT. Because he was playing like 9 BO3s at the fucking LAN and just smurfing all of them against every level of opposition. He wasn't, as you say, the worst ever examples. Even though I love the Katowice and the Cologne format for ESL, because essentially, if you also know how TO shit works, it actually is very sort of like clever in the nuance of where it skips things so that like a fan won't notice as much. You are right. There are some really classic examples. I'll give you the most famous one to me. If you ever go back at that 2019 ESL Cologne where Liquid wins the Grand Slam and they beat Vitality and Ziwu in the final, you'll go and look at the playoffs and you'll go, NIP? Because NIP's in the playoffs, the top 6. But it's because there are just like upsets in the BO1s and then they win one BO3 against like, you know, some not even top team themselves, like Heroic or something. And then they're just into that match in the group. That's the one where you go to the round of 6 if you lose. Then they play, I think, like Liquid and just immediately, or Astralis or something, and just, or Vitality, one of them, and just go, I think it's Astralis, and then just go straight into the round of 6. But essentially all they did to do that was win a BO3 against Heroic, who wasn't a top team. That was when Blamef used to just carry as the IGL. And this is not the good Heroic you're all thinking of. So there have been classic examples, even in the great formats, of where there's always a hole somewhere in a league where someone like you're saying can end up with a much better sort of placing than what they did at the tournament. Whereas the obvious nightmare one is the worst position ever in Counter-Strike to be in is the team that gets knocked out in the first match at Katowice or Cologne, runs the whole lower bracket and loses narrowly on 3 maps in that last decider match. Because you might have actually had a fucking you might actually have been like the 5th best team in that tournament, but you will look like a bomb because you didn't make playoffs. By the way, if you're someone like, I'll do it again, Elige, you don't even get to now be considered a great player, even though you just played way more series and carried some bitch-ass NA player on bullshit Vertigo games that you don't even like. That's some Sisyphus pushing a fucking boulder up a hill. And you do it all, and then you lose 14-16 on the OT game. And then they, the dreaded they, those enemies at HLTV, they come out and they go, here are 28 players who are better than Liege. Like, they don't really. I'm being absolutely ridiculous with my hyperbole. That is what I am a specialist at. Lastly, I'll just say, I also definitely agree on the BO5 one. Even though, here's what people don't get. I do think they won the major as a fluke Na'Vi. But I was obviously an insane Na'Vi fan the whole year. I'm a mad fucking Alexi being played fanboy. I think they have for the fucking shit. But I'll tell you what, on paper, I'm sorry, they probably shouldn't have been the team of the year if we'd have actually used format like this. If you ever saw in the BO5s, they went 2-3, and one of them, by the way, was against Eternal Fire when Eternal Fire wasn't this good. Like, they actually basically got their ass handed to them by any elite team that they played in a BO5. But if you put them in BO3, they couldn't be stopped. Because then they could lose the nuke, but they win the other 2. So the real problem is, I think if you have BO5, especially for majors, it's the same thing you're saying about the BO3 group stage. I'm not going to bitch very much if the underdog wins. You know what? If we go back in time and put the Boston major into a BO5, and then like NIP did at Auckland, then if Cloud9 beats fucking FaZe, I'll just take it on the chin, mate. My problem is that you got murked every other time it wasn't the major. So I think if that was a BO5, they're up 2-1, but they don't win the series. So I agree. I actually think this format is way better. I would love this for majors. Even on, by the way, the whole thing that seeding can't be perfect. Certainly, you could still have, it can happen, the guy who goes 3-2 or 2-3, and you look at, he's got the worst draw every time. Every time in each phase, he's got that best possible team. Even so, that's quite rare, and it tends to be one team that can happen to. And we can just use our eyes then and go, right, you just got unlucky that one time. I think the worst thing about the majors is the amount of fucking teams that either go 2-3 or make the playoffs, and it's like, By the way, I once looked this up. Sadly, I'm not a stats guy, so I don't have the number for you right now. It is bonkers how many of the fluke teams in the playoffs just won the 2BO1s, guys. It is fucking crazy. And sometimes they didn't even win against the good teams. It's like Team Liquid at this last one. Sometimes they just got like, they had a weird lucky seed in the first round. Then there was an upset in the other one. They drew the easiest team in the 1-0 group, and suddenly they're 2 lives up. I think that is insanity for majors. Again, if there's any tournament we can run BO3s, it's the fucking major. Add a week. Take a week off some out of the calendar, put it on there. It will make it so much better. And also, I'll just throw this out there again. Who the fuck wouldn't have said at the end of that Dust 2 in a perfect world, let's go to map 4. Bro, we were all ready to fucking blast off to the moon. That was insane. But that's the end of the tournament. If that had been a best of 5, holy shit, would that have banged? That would have been so insane. Yeah, there you go.
Say one thing on the Elite one, right? You might want to check what he did in Copenhagen after winning some best of ones. Great rating after the best of ones. Let him down in the best of 3s a little bit.
Okay.
Because this is the thing a lot of people missed on the Elite one is because we did look at every tournament.
Sure.
Like if Elite was actually an amazing player in every single elimination decider, like he just gets EVPs. He only had 1 EVP all year.
Okay.
And it's because of where he got his rating. It is possible to get EVPs in those teams. It's obviously much harder. And obviously,
I'll just say this. I think
it's not supposed to be a best 20 players right now list.
No,
it's
by the way, that's the biggest
list.
problem is that people think it is the top 20 players. But it never ever was that ever in history. And it's not even trying to normalise for that. The real problem is this, Nero. Without making it a whole thing, because I haven't got 20 minutes here, mate. We have to end this show soon. I'll just say this. When you say that he didn't carry those games, bro, I would challenge you to find me any other player on the top 20 that had teammates as bad as his, though. Bro, think about what he has to do on that. That is some Nico Sport shit as far as I'm concerned. That was insane, that. But you know what? Here's the difference.
Part of why he made it onto the list.
I'll give you the olive branch, Nero. The difference is I would just cheat and say, here are my top 20 players. And then he'd be like 8th or whatever. If I actually had to do what you do, I do the same thing that Maui can confirm this. If someone does a GOAT list, if you do a GOAT list of NFL quarterbacks, I will say Tom Brady because that's going to include his resume, rings, all that. But if you ask me who the best is, that's not the same as greatest in my opinion. So the best is Peyton Manning. So similarly, if I did a list, I would agree with you, Nero. I probably wouldn't have him that far down the top 20. I'd have probably had him 15th. You know what I mean? But I wouldn't have him notice like 7th like I would if it was doing the Thorin, who was the best player list. So I get what you were doing there. We're only joking when we say that you guys wrecked him on that one.
Damage per round win. Damage per round win. Number 2 of all the HLTV top 20 players. He's second hardest carry. Second hardest carry.
Okay.
This is the thing. Like that's always the hardest thing is like I can always stand there at the end of the year and say hand on heart, we applied the criteria as well as we could. And
absolutely, yeah.
You know, that's
as I said earlier, you're not actually picking the players. You're also having to go off the numbers, of course. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I'm the only thing that annoys me is when people we can have debates about criteria all day, right? And I think that's the more interesting way to challenge the top 20.
Absolutely,
it's never going to happen. Obviously,
no.
Is to say what you would disagree with. Like even the people saying I'm inventing arena rating. Sure, you think we overvalued arena rating. That's an interesting discussion to have. Yeah. But they don't do that. They just say, well, but Elish has like a 1.25 rating. Why is he 19th? It's like, well, obviously we look into it more than that.
Yeah.
And you can get those raw stats.
Yeah.
But, you know.
And by the way, here's another reason that's not your fault.
Can't win.
The reason why the Nico one will always stick in everyone's craw is we already have that catchy name, Nico Sports. The problem is there isn't one for Elish and complexity. So my joke was it wasn't complexity, it was simply Elish. Not bad. But I came up with it way too late. He's already out the team. Doesn't fucking matter now, does it? But anyway, let's go to one last thing before, speaking of Nico, the great times in MOUZ Sports, where I think he was actually the second or third best player in the world, but those villains at HLTV with their even more primitive technology, that they hadn't even touched the obelisk at that time. They were just working with fucking bones and shit. Back in the day, obviously, they used to just malign him. So I have memories that are good and bad. But if you want to have a great place to store and remember your memories, how about Aura Frames? Because this is a great way to share memories and photos with friends, family, or your partner. So if you've got an aunt or a grandma or a mum or a dad or an uncle or a granddad, how about you just get them one of these? You get a savings and then just set it up. It's super easy, by the way. It takes like 2 minutes to set up. There's like a free app. They just need Wi-Fi. You can upload it all remotely. And then once you've got them set up, now you can basically have it so that while they're at home in another country, in a different part of town, it's basically somewhere you don't want to visit or can't, and you forget to do that call all the time, you can still be like updating them on how your life's going. You can choose which photos go to their frame. You can add in new ones. You can even add video at this point in time. So then they're going to feel connected to you, aren't they? Even though you didn't call them on Sunday like you were supposed to, because you were too busy playing video games or watching Gamer Legion, not make it to a LAN because of the VRS system. So all they need is simple stuff, like I say. Also, it can, as I say, play a video up to 30 seconds. They have a very clever way that they make the screen so that it literally looks like you've put a photo in there. It doesn't look like you printed it at all. It has super high quality. It looks like it's just a photo. It also has a special brightness aspect to it where it can like automatically adjust for the amount of light in the room. And at night, when you turn out the lights, it just turns the frame off. It doesn't just stay on like a digital frame. So it's so easy. Like, they've really designed this to be like, you set it and forget it, but that's obviously someone else's slogan, so do not sue me for that. So right now, you can save on the perfect gift that keeps giving. By the way, I've used loads of these. Monty's got one. Maui's got one, I think.
Yep.
Right now,
my parents got it.
You can save on the perfect gift that keeps giving by visiting auraframes.com. For a limited time, listeners can get $20 off their best-selling Carver mat frame with code S&B, all one word. That's AURA frames.com, promo code S&B. Support the show by mentioning us at the checkout. Terms and conditions apply. By the way, the code works in the USA, Canada, and the UK. So obviously a lot of people listening in English, it works where you are. By the way, if you have like family that lives in England and you don't live in one of those countries, you could also just send it to their house, couldn't you? Because obviously at that point in time, it's going to be from the UK. So yes, thank you to Order Frames. I have one myself. I actually think it's excellent. I've even asked them, I'm a scammer like this, I asked them for the bigger one too, so I can have an even better one. And this is certainly something I'm going to give to loads of people. Because like I say, it's actually OP. Like in the modern day, we don't share photos. You don't send photos from your phone to random relatives, etc. But actually, they might really want to know how you're doing. So okay, let's go on to the last point. I've made this really simple because I also want to really see what the panel think about this. My ugly point, this is my problem child right now in analysis, boys. It's actually a team I am almost scared to bet at all on their matches. I have games I call trap games. I just say, stay the fuck away. Spoiler, when like someone like Big plays against like, pick a team, FlyQuest, stay the fuck away from that. You know, they don't even know if they're going to win that game or not. It's a nightmare to try and figure out the odds. This is the team that I have my problem child. It is 3D Max. Right, I'm telling you, the eye test doesn't check out at all. They can't be that good. There's no way Body can keep up that like T-side entry work. It doesn't even make sense, the AWPing in the team. I refuse to believe they have a good IGL. None of it makes sense. It doesn't even make sense you could have a French team that's doing these results that doesn't have Ziwu in. None of it, nothing makes sense. But I'll tell you what, they keep tripping over and beating teams I think are way better. And sometimes they have games where they actually smurf, I'm not even joking, for a map. And it starts to even win me over. Like, are they actually a top 10 team? And then they'll play fucking anyone and just lose 2-0. And I'm like, no. I was always right about that. Fuck yeah. The hate, keep the hate. Always remember the hate. Never give in to the sentimentality. So I want to know what you guys think, because the reason it's ugly is I don't even know if they're actually good, but they keep getting wins where it's like I can't say they're bad. So how the fuck do you guys think of 3D Max?
I'd want to open this one up because I actually have taken a huge liking to this team just watching them also, because I mean, I guess it's when they're outclassed in terms of personnel, it's so abundantly clear. But when they play these other tier 1.5 teams, I honestly think 3D Max has the best out of spawn call strategies of like any team in that region, like, or in that area, you know, like their strat book is so good, it's so detailed, but if one thing goes wrong in the strategy, I just think that they're going to collapse every single time. If they lose that opening pick, then they're just in a situation that's or they lost it a little too early, or the other team played like a disruptive CT setup, like push lower tunnels on Dust 2 or something like that, then they just like lose their hands completely. Like they have no idea how to react to it. And that's why I think them getting Body should help them a lot, because he's not calling, but he's definitely going to be a secondary voice for them. And that should in turn help them figure out these kind of problems that they find themselves in the mid round. Because sometimes they would be in like not even bad like 4v4s, and they just still did not know how to compose themselves last year. So now I feel like I'm going. I'm not sure if I've actually seen that yet. I'm not gonna lie. Like I haven't covered all of the 3D Max games this year or anything. But I feel like I'm expecting more of that now with Body, that they're going to level up in terms of mid rounding. And based off of the results, like for example, I didn't cover their games today, or at this tournament, like the last couple of them or two of them. So I don't really know how they won versus MIBR, for example, today. But I have to imagine that's partially it. Like if something goes wrong, they have a plan B because he's going to bring some more ideas. Yeah, like but yeah, no, they are. It's just I think they've actually now I think I can like solve the enigma of them. It's just that they've kind of become the gatekeepers of tier 1.5. Like they kind of are. If you're beating 3D Max, you're probably in a playoff. You're probably a playoff bound team actually.
Okay.
But if you're losing to 3D Max, you're like also on this cusp of like, are you making the playoffs? Are you a flash in the pan? Also, like it's harder to read past that.
Yeah, I think I agree with most of that. I think they're just a really fun team. I feel like they're one of those teams that just kind of restore my faith in the game again. Because I think CS2, like it was nearly one of my ugly points, is just I hate how star focused it is. I hate how it feels like every team is just a firepower team. Like we don't have heroic anymore, basically. And I think 3D Max are that kind of mini heroic in that way, where it's just their games are always fun because they're interesting and different, and they know that they don't have the best individuals. But then that means that if they're at this level with individuals we all know are much worse, then it's just much, it's much more impressive in a way. So I think they're just so fun to watch. And I think signing Body as well I think people forget that before Body went to Fnatic, how like good his stats were as well. I think he could actually get back to that, because I think the one thing they were lacking is that kind of like aggressive star rifler. And I think Body, he's not going to be amazing, but I think he has a lot of impact in those positions a few years ago. And I think if he can get back to that, then, I maybe they do nick a playoffs or something. And I'd like to see that, because like even like a Vitality or something, like are they a firepower team? Like sort of like we've got Na'Vi, right? The tactical team. And then below that, because everyone's international, everyone's just got really good players. It's hard to pin down like in a way, when in 2016 or something, when I got into CS, there was much more of a divide between the firepower teams and the tactical teams. Like everyone's kind of like emerged. So it's really fun to see 3D Max be that kind of that underdog again. I think it's my favorite type of underdog for sure.